Marcus stood at the edge of the school parking lot, the wind biting at his skin as he fumbled with the worn-out strings of his sneakers. The faded red canvas had seen better days, there were scuff marks, a hole near the toe, and the sole was barely holding on. But to Marcus, these shoes were more than just footwear. They were a symbol of his resilience, the one thing he could always count on when everything else felt out of control. But that didn't stop the kids from mocking him. "Yo, Marcus. You gonna run a marathon or just shuffle to your next class?" Jake snickered, his group of friends laughing behind him. The sound echoed in the crisp air, and Marcus' stomach dropped. He hated days like this, when the sharp sting of judgment cut deeper than he wanted to admit. He glanced around. A sea of fresh, brand-new sneakers flashed in front of him, shiny Jordans, limited edition Nikes, designer kicks. Every pair was a message, loud and clear. "I'm better than you. Man, you seriously wear those things to school?" Jake continued, pointing at Marcus' shoes. "Did your mom buy them for you at a yard sale or what?" Marcus bit his lip, resisting the urge to snap back. He knew better than to let them see how much their words hurt. His mom worked 2 jobs to keep food on the table, and buying him expensive shoes wasn't even close to being a priority. But that didn't stop the taunts. They came from every direction, behind his back, in the hallways, even in class. The rich kids could afford to look down on him, to make fun of his clothes, his hair, his shoes. Everything about him was just wrong in their eyes. But in that moment, standing there with his head slightly down, Marcus realized something. He was done being the joke. Done with letting them define who he was. Done with feeling like he didn't belong. And yet, he knew one thing for sure, he had to get through this day. He had no choice. The bell rang, signaling the start of first period, and Marcus turned to walk away. As he stepped into the school building, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had just been reminded of something he already knew. Life wasn't fair. It was never going to be. His feet took him to his first class of the day, but as he walked, his mind began to wander. What if he could change things? What if he could make his own shoes? What if his shoes could say something about him that no one else could ignore? Before Marcus could entertain the thought any longer, his phone buzzed in his pocket, pulling him back to the present. He glanced down, seeing a text from his mom. "Dinner at 7. Don't be late." Marcus couldn't help but smile. His mom might not have much, but she always made sure they had dinner together. No matter how tough things got, that was their time. He couldn't let the cruelty of school ruin that. As he made his way to class, he found himself lost in thought again. The more he thought about the way people treated him, the more determined he became. Why let the rich kids dictate his worth? Why let their judgments hold him back? He had his own story to tell, and maybe, just maybe, he could use his creativity to tell it in a way they couldn't ignore. But the problem was, he didn't know how to make that happen. Not yet, anyway. Marcus had always been good with his hands. He'd spent hours tinkering with anything that could be fixed, broken bikes, old radios, whatever he could find. But designing something that could stand up to the shoes he saw in the halls every day? That seemed impossible. They were so far ahead, so much more than what he had. The idea of competing with those kids felt like an uphill battle. Yet something about that idea of designing shoes kept coming back to him, swirling in his mind. He wanted to do it. He had to do it. But how? The day dragged on, each class a blur of lectures, notes, and distractions. Marcus couldn't stop thinking about his shoes. Could he actually pull something like this off? How could he, a kid with barely enough money to pay for lunch, afford to design his own sneakers? He had no connections, no resources. And what if his design was just another failure? The thought stung. By the time school ended, Marcus was exhausted, not physically, but mentally. Every step out of that building was a reminder of everything he didn't have, everything the other kids had that he would never have. The expensive cars, the designer clothes, the ease with which they moved through the world. And him? He was just another kid trying to get by. But as he walked through the gates and onto the sidewalk, a glimmer of resolve sparked inside him. Maybe he didn't need their approval. Maybe he didn't need to be like them at all. Maybe he could show them something they didn't expect. At home, his mom was already in the kitchen, cooking dinner. The smell of baked chicken filled the house, and Marcus felt a brief sense of peace. He dropped his bag on the floor and sat at the kitchen table. "You okay, baby?" His mom's voice was warm, full of concern. She always seemed to know when something was wrong. "Yeah, Mom. Just, a lot on my mind." She nodded, her smile gentle. "I know things aren't easy, but you're strong. Don't let anyone tell you who you're supposed to be." Marcus stared at her for a moment, the weight of her words sinking in. He could almost hear her saying it over and over again, like a mantra. "Don't let anyone tell you who you're supposed to be." He wasn't sure what exactly sparked it, maybe it was the words, maybe it was the look in her eyes, but suddenly, Marcus knew what he had to do. He didn't have to fit into their world. He didn't have to change who he was. But he could create something new. Something of his own. And if that meant designing a pair of shoes that would make them look twice, then so be it. That night, as he lay in bed, Marcus stared up at the ceiling, thinking about the rich kids who had mocked him all day. They were nothing to him, not really. They could laugh, they could sneer, they could point fingers all they wanted. But they would never understand what it felt like to make something out of nothing. To fight for a place in the world. To create something that would leave an imprint, no matter how hard they tried to erase it. He wasn't going to wait for their approval. He was going to make them notice. And that, he decided as sleep started to take over, was only the beginning. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? Marcus had always felt like he was standing at the edge of something. Life, for him, had never been straightforward. It wasn't a straight path leading to success or happiness. Instead, it was a winding, rough road with countless potholes, dead ends, and unmarked detours. He had learned early that surviving meant being resourceful. Born in the heart of South Chicago, Marcus was no stranger to struggle. The neighborhood he grew up in was tough. It wasn't the kind of place where dreams flourished effortlessly. But it was home, and for better or worse, it was where Marcus had learned to fight, both literally and figuratively. His mother, Donna, was his hero. A single mom who worked 2 jobs, one as a nurse's aide in a local hospital and the other as a waitress at a greasy spoon diner, she was the one constant, the one person who never let Marcus forget that he was worth something. Despite her own exhaustion, she always managed to put food on the table, pay the rent, and even squeeze in a few moments to talk about life, dreams, and the future. "Marcus," she would say, her voice warm but firm, "life won't always be easy. People will look down on you, but never let them make you feel small. No matter what, you stand tall." It was advice that stuck with him, even when everything around him seemed to be falling apart. His mom might not have had much, but she gave him a sense of worth, a sense of purpose. And that was everything to him. Marcus's dad? Well, that was a different story. He'd left when Marcus was just a baby, and to this day, Marcus didn't know exactly why. His mom never spoke of him, only offering vague excuses when Marcus would ask. "He's out there somewhere," she'd say. "But you don't need him to be something special. You already are." And so, Marcus had grown up without a father figure. He didn't really mind at first, at least not until he started school. At that point, it became clear that his reality was different from most of the other kids. While other kids wore brand new shoes, played with the latest gadgets, or got fresh clothes every season. Marcus was lucky if he could make it through the week without his shoes getting scuffed or his shirt getting too tight. By the time he hit high school, Marcus had learned to accept the stares, the comments, and the quiet whispers behind his back. He understood that being poor and being black meant people expected less from him. They didn't expect him to be successful, to rise above the stereotypes, or to make anything of himself. But one thing was certain. Marcus refused to fall into the mold they tried to shape him into. He wasn't a statistic. He wasn't the kid who would drop out, end up in trouble, or disappear into the streets like so many others. He was more than that. He had to be. It was during his freshman year that he first got a taste of how cruel people could be when they thought they had power over someone else. One day, as he was walking down the hall, a group of kids, mostly the ones who always seemed to have it all, noticed his shoes. They weren't the latest, and they definitely weren't new. The sole of one was hanging on by a thread, and the other was missing a lace. The laughter that erupted from them in that moment felt like it reached into his chest, grabbing hold of something deep within him. "Yo, Marcus. You wearing those to school?" Jake, a kid who was part of the school's cool crowd, grinned as he pointed at Marcus' shoes. The others joined in, laughing, snickering, and making comments about how ghetto his shoes looked. Marcus didn't respond. He knew that if he opened his mouth, he'd either cry or say something he'd regret. He walked away quickly, pretending not to hear them, but the weight of their words stayed with him the whole day. That moment planted a seed in his mind, one that would grow over time, the belief that in order to succeed, he had to do something that no one could take away from him. But his mother's words echoed in his head, even then, "Stand tall." At home, after a long day of school, Marcus would retreat to his room, away from the world. He didn't have much in the way of possessions, but he had his sketches. Over the years, he'd become obsessed with drawing. It wasn't just doodles or abstract art, he'd started sketching shoes. A pair here, a design there. He would get lost in the lines, imagining a world where he could create shoes that were more than just accessories. They could be a statement, something bold, something different. But those sketches stayed locked away in his notebook, hidden from the world. No one at school knew about his passion. No one knew how he spent hours sketching after homework, bringing his imagination to life. No one knew how those sketches were his escape from everything he couldn't control, his life, his reputation, and the constant judgment of others. But it wasn't just the designs that filled his thoughts. It was what those designs could represent. Each shoe was a story, his story. And it was a story he wasn't ready to share with anyone. The other kids at school didn't care about his sketches. They didn't care about his dreams. To them, he was just another kid in the back row, one who wore shoes that didn't fit in with the latest trends. What would they think if they knew that, in his mind, he was already designing the future of footwear? Marcus didn't have the resources to turn those sketches into reality. But he was determined to change that. He'd heard of kids from neighborhoods like his making it big, turning their passions into careers. If they could do it, so could he. His mom's unwavering belief in him kept him going, even when it felt like the whole world was telling him to quit. Her voice was always there, urging him forward, reminding him that he wasn't alone. "Marcus, you're special. You have something they can't take from you." Those words stuck with him. In a world that seemed intent on tearing him down, that belief was the one thing he could hold on to. It was the thing that kept him moving, kept him dreaming. And maybe, just maybe, it was the thing that would eventually make him stand out in a way that no one would ever forget. As Marcus sat in his room that evening, the sound of his mother's laughter in the kitchen, he opened his sketchbook again. He looked at the shoes he'd drawn, some had high tops, others were low, and all of them were unique, unlike anything he had ever seen in stores. He ran his fingers over the pages, imagining what it would feel like to see someone wear them, to have people look at them and say, "Where did you get those?" For the first time, Marcus felt something stirring inside him, a flicker of hope that maybe, just maybe, he could make his mark on the world. The bell rang, signaling the end of another long school day. As Marcus stuffed his books into his backpack, he could feel the tension creeping up his spine. He tried to ignore it, pushing aside the sensation that something was about to happen. But deep down, he knew it was inevitable. It always was. As he made his way to the exit, he spotted Jake and his group of friends hanging out by the school gates. The laughter and chatter filled the air, their voices rising above the hum of passing cars. Marcus could hear them before he even reached them, like a buzzing sound that he couldn't escape. "Here comes Marcus, the kid with the yard sale sneakers." Jake's voice cut through the crowd. The familiar knot tightened in Marcus' stomach. He'd hoped, just for once, that they would leave him alone. But no. They were waiting for him. And when Jake saw him, he made sure to make the moment unforgettable. "Yo, Marcus." Jake grinned, showing off his new pair of shiny Nikes. The design was sleek, the kind of sneaker that screamed money. "What are you rocking today, huh? Are those things even safe to wear outside? Shouldn't they be in a museum somewhere?" The group laughed, their amusement echoing in Marcus' ears. His chest tightened as his face flushed, but he fought the urge to turn away. The mockery, the sneers, they were all part of the daily routine. Yet, this time, something felt different. It wasn't just a comment about his shoes, it was an attack on his dignity. "Man, come on," one of the other boys, Jason, chimed in. "You're gonna walk around like that and think you're cool? Those shoes are a joke, dude." Marcus didn't respond. There was nothing he could say to make them understand. They would never get it. To them, shoes were just shoes, something to show off, something to prove they were better than everyone else. To Marcus, they were more than that. They were the product of his life, his experiences. His shoes told a story they couldn't even begin to imagine. He clenched his fists, biting his lip to keep from snapping. But the truth was, the laughter wasn't just about the shoes. It was about everything that came with it. It was about his life, the neighborhood he came from, the way he dressed, the way people looked at him as if he was invisible. He wanted to scream. He wanted to shout, to tell them that he was more than just the shoes on his feet. That he had dreams and talent and ideas. But he couldn't. Not yet. Not until he had something more to show for himself. "Yeah, whatever," Marcus muttered, turning to walk away. But as he moved past Jake, the words that followed felt like a punch to the gut. "Don't worry, Marcus. Maybe one day, someone will give you a chance to make shoes. You'll probably make them for people who still shop at thrift stores, huh?" The taunts grew fainter as he walked away, but they hung in the air like a suffocating cloud. Each word lodged itself deeper into his mind, embedding itself into the story he'd been telling himself for years. The story that he was just another kid from the wrong side of the tracks, someone who would always be overlooked, always be mocked. The walk home that day felt longer than usual. His footsteps were heavy, the weight of their words pressing down on him with every step. He didn't go straight home. Instead, he found a quiet spot near the edge of the neighborhood, by an old, rusted fence that separated the street from the small patch of woods behind the school. There, he sat down, leaning against the fence, and pulled off his shoes. The soles were worn, the fabric frayed. He looked at them, really looked at them for the first time in a long time. They were more than just a mockery to him. They were a symbol of his survival. He didn't have the luxury of luxury, but he had something more, perseverance. But today, it didn't feel like enough. His phone buzzed, pulling him from his thoughts. It was a text from his mom. "Where are you, baby? Dinner's almost ready." Marcus stood up, wiping his hands on his jeans. He stuffed his shoes back on, took a deep breath, and made his way home. At dinner, the familiar hum of their kitchen felt like a small comfort. His mom was already at the stove, humming a tune as she stirred the pot of stew on the stove. The warm smell filled the room, and for a brief moment, Marcus felt a little lighter. "Everything okay, baby?" his mom asked, not turning around from the stove. Her tone was calm, but there was a softness in it that told Marcus she already knew something was wrong. "Yeah," he muttered, sliding into his seat at the table. "Just another day." "Those kids at school?" she asked without missing a beat. She always knew when something was bothering him, even if he didn't say it. "Yeah," he replied, his voice quiet. "They're still making fun of my shoes. Still acting like I don't belong there." Donna set the ladle down, wiped her hands on her apron, and turned to face him. Her eyes, warm and full of understanding, met his. "Marcus," she said gently, "you're not them. You're not like anyone else, and that's a good thing. You've got a gift, a talent that no one can take from you. You don't need their approval to be great. Just remember that." Marcus looked at her, his throat tightening. She was always so sure of him. So sure that he could do anything he set his mind to. But how could he do anything with nothing? How could he make something of himself when everyone around him seemed to have it all figured out? "I know, Mom," he said, trying to muster a smile. "I know. It's just hard sometimes." His mom reached across the table and placed a hand on his. "I know. But you're tougher than you think. You always have been." The warmth from her touch spread through him, but the doubts were still there, swirling in his chest. He was tired of being mocked. Tired of being overlooked. And now, more than ever, he needed to prove to himself, and to everyone else, that he was more than just the shoes on his feet. That night, after dinner, Marcus sat in his room once again, his sketchbook open in front of him. He stared at the shoes he'd designed, the ones that had been just a dream for so long. They were different from what he saw every day in school. They weren't about logos or brand names, they were about expression, individuality, strength. They told a story. His story. The pressure was mounting. He knew what he had to do. He needed to bring these designs to life. But how? He had no connections, no resources. Just a few rough sketches and a burning desire to create something that could make people take notice. Something that could make him more than just the kid with the yard sale sneakers. As he traced the outline of a shoe on the page, he couldn't shake the feeling that this was only the beginning. But it was going to take everything he had, and more, to turn this dream into a reality. The days that followed were a blur of school, home, and work. Marcus spent his afternoons in his room, sketching, sometimes not even feeling the weight of time slipping by. His shoes were still the same, worn, old, and relentlessly mocked, but now, with every insult, with every sneer, the fire inside him grew stronger. They had no idea. They had no idea who they were messing with. One Saturday afternoon, Marcus was at the local thrift store when he found something that made him stop in his tracks. It wasn't much, just an old sewing machine sitting in the corner of the shop. It looked like it had been there for years, covered in dust and rust. But something about it caught his eye. Maybe it was the way it stood there, forgotten, just like him, something overlooked, something with potential. The price tag was cheap, too cheap. Only $35. Marcus felt a rush of excitement. He knew it wasn't much. It wasn't the state-of-the-art equipment that designers use to create high-end shoes. But it was a start. It was something. He could make this work. He bought the machine and lugged it home, feeling like a kid with a treasure chest. The whole walk back, he could barely contain his excitement. This could be it, the first real step toward his dream. The first real step toward proving everyone wrong. At home, his mom raised an eyebrow when he walked through the door with the machine. "That's an interesting find," she said, setting down her grocery bags. "What are you planning to do with that?" Marcus grinned. "I'm going to learn how to make shoes." Donna's expression softened into one of admiration. "Well, if anyone can figure it out, it's you." She patted him on the shoulder before moving to the kitchen. "Just don't expect me to help you out with that." I've got enough on my plate. Marcus laughed, nodding. I got it, Mom. You just keep doing what you do best. I'll take care of this. With the sewing machine set up in his room, Marcus spent hours studying online tutorials, watching videos of cobblers and designers talking about shoe construction. It wasn't glamorous. It wasn't easy. But every stitch he learned, every step he took toward mastering the craft, felt like progress. His hands became familiar with the fabric, the leather, the laces. Each design he created grew more real, more solid, more tangible. He wasn't sure what he was doing exactly. His sketches, the ones he'd poured his heart into, had been drawn with a dream, but now they had to be translated into something functional. And the first attempt was far from perfect. The stitching was uneven, the soles wobbly, and the design, though bold, looked like it belonged more in an art gallery than on someone's feet. But that didn't matter. Not yet. What mattered was that he was creating something. Something that, even if it wasn't perfect, carried his essence in every seam. The process wasn't just about making shoes. It was about proving to himself that he could do something, anything, to change his story. The process was difficult, frustrating, and at times, humiliating. The shoes didn't always come out the way he imagined, and there were moments when he wanted to quit. But there was always that flicker of hope, that fire inside him, that refused to let him give up. As the weeks went by, Marcus continued working in silence. He didn't show his shoes to anyone. Not his mom, not his friends, not even the people who had mocked him. He didn't need their approval. Not yet. But one day, that changed. It was a Wednesday afternoon when he heard the familiar sound of footsteps outside his window. His best friend, Darnell, was knocking on his door. "Yo, Marcus." Darnell called from the hallway. "You home?" "Yeah, come in," Marcus replied, standing up from his workbench, quickly stuffing the shoes he'd been working on under his desk. He didn't want anyone to see them yet. Not until they were perfect. Darnell pushed open the door, his wide grin lighting up the room. He looked around, taking in the cluttered room with the sewing machine and piles of fabric. "Yo, what's all this?" Marcus shrugged, trying to look casual. "Just, figuring some stuff out." Darnell's eyes flicked over the room, then back to Marcus. "Man, I know you've been working on something. Don't act like I don't know. What's the deal?" Marcus hesitated for a moment, then pulled out one of the shoes from under his desk. It wasn't finished, not by a long shot, but it was his creation. The leather was still a bit stiff, the stitching uneven, but it was real. Darnell's eyes widened. He stepped forward and took the shoe from Marcus' hands, turning it over, examining it. "Bro, this is crazy. You made this?" Darnell's voice was full of disbelief. "This is wild. You're making shoes?" "Yeah," Marcus muttered. "I figured it was time. Gotta start somewhere, right?" Darnell didn't answer immediately. Instead, he turned the shoe over in his hands again, squinting at the design. This could be something, Marcus. You could sell this. Like for real. I mean, people would buy this. You just gotta finish it. Perfect it." The idea hung in the air, heavy and electric. The thought of selling shoes, his shoes, seemed so far-fetched, so impossible. But hearing Darnell say it aloud made it feel just a little bit more possible. "You think so?" Marcus asked, his voice unsure. "I know so, man. Just look at the design. This is something different, something people would actually wear. You've got something here." Marcus didn't know what to say. The idea of selling his shoes, of putting them out there into the world, terrified him. What if people hated them? What if they were just as ridiculous as everyone had always made him feel? But there was something in Darnell's eyes, a spark of belief that Marcus hadn't seen before. And suddenly, Marcus realized that maybe, just maybe, he wasn't the only one who saw something in these shoes. That night, Marcus lay in bed, staring at the ceiling. His mind raced, running over the possibilities, over the doubts. He wasn't ready. He didn't have the experience, the connections, the resources. But the fire inside him burned brighter than ever before. It was time to take the first step. His dream was no longer just a dream, it was real, and it was waiting for him to claim it. The days began to blend into one another as Marcus dedicated every free moment to his shoes. The thrill of his first successful attempt at creating a design, the sense of bringing something to life with his own hands, was an addiction. It kept him up late into the night, hunched over his workbench, sewing, cutting, and tweaking. He spent hours refining his technique, experimenting with different materials, trying to perfect the feel, the structure, the look of each shoe. And then came the day that would change everything. It started out like any other Saturday morning. Marcus was up early, working on a new design when his phone buzzed. He didn't usually check it when he was deep in his craft, but something told him to look this time. His heart skipped when he saw the notification. It was a message from Darnell. "Bro, I think you should check this out. This is huge." Marcus quickly opened the link, and there it was, staring back at him. A post on Instagram, shared by one of the most popular fashion influencers in their city, Jasmine Ruiz. Jasmine had over 1 million followers, and she was known for being a trendsetter in streetwear fashion. The post featured a pair of sneakers, a pair that looked strikingly similar to the ones Marcus had been working on. The caption read, "Caught these on a local creator. Don't sleep on these. #support local #streetwear vibes." Marcus stared at the screen, unable to process what he was seeing. The shoes in the post weren't exactly his, but they looked almost identical to the ones he'd been perfecting. There was no mistaking the clean lines, the bold stitching, and the unique design he had poured so much of himself into. It wasn't a huge feature, but it was the beginning. Jasmine had tagged the maker of the shoes, and Marcus's heart raced as he clicked the link to her story. It took him a few seconds to process it, but there it was, his name. It was barely a mention, just a small tag on the post, but it was a tag all the same. He was being recognized, and the moment felt surreal. His fingers trembled as he typed a quick message to Darnell, "Is this for real?" Within seconds, Darnell replied, "Bro, I swear this is real. Jasmine doesn't shout out just anyone. You've got something here. This could be your big break." Marcus leaned back in his chair, his mind spinning. What was happening? His shoes, his designs, were out there. People were talking about them. He was being noticed. But the thrill of it all quickly morphed into a new kind of pressure. What now? For the next few days, Marcus did everything he could to keep his head in the game. He knew this was a turning point, but the magnitude of it all was overwhelming. He couldn't help but replay Jasmine's post over and over in his mind. Every time he looked at it, he was reminded of how far he had come, but also how far he still had to go. People started reaching out. Strangers left comments on his Instagram page asking where they could buy the shoes, asking for his brand name, even sending direct messages offering collaborations. The attention was intoxicating, but with it came fear. What if he couldn't keep up? What if he wasn't ready? The next Friday afternoon, Marcus got another message. This time it was from someone completely unexpected, an old friend from school, a guy named Trevor, who had been part of the popular crowd. Trevor had never been particularly kind to Marcus back in the day, but now, there was something different in his tone. "Yo, Marcus, I saw those kicks you've been making. They're fire, bro, seriously. I think you've got a real shot at this. I've got some connections in the fashion industry. I could help you get your stuff out there, if you're interested." Marcus stared at the message, unsure how to respond. Trevor had never been someone he could trust, yet here he was, offering to help. The skepticism was there, but at the same time, Marcus couldn't deny that the offer was tempting. Maybe this was his shot to get his designs into the hands of the right people. Maybe this was the opportunity he'd been waiting for. He thought about it for a moment, then typed back, "I appreciate it, Trevor, but I'm good for now. I'm doing this on my own." Marcus knew the road ahead would be tough, but he wasn't about to let someone like Trevor co-opt his dream. He didn't need anyone telling him how to run his business or questioning his passion. This was his vision, and he was determined to see it through on his own terms. Days later, Marcus finally worked up the courage to reach out to Jasmine's team. He wasn't sure if they would respond, but what did he have to lose? He sent an email thanking her for the shout-out, expressing his gratitude, and telling her how much it meant to him. He included a link to his website, which was still barebones but showcased the shoes he had been working on. To his surprise, the next day, he received a response. "Hey Marcus, I love your work. I think your designs have real potential. Would love to chat more about featuring your shoes in an upcoming photo shoot. Let me know if you're interested." Marcus nearly dropped his phone. He read the message 3 times, his brain struggling to process what he was reading. This was it. This was the chance he'd been waiting for. The following week was a whirlwind. Marcus rushed to finish his designs, putting everything he had into making each pair flawless. The photo shoot was scheduled for the next week, and he wanted to be ready. He contacted a local seamstress to help with finishing the shoes, adding custom details, perfecting the stitching. He spent hours at the sewing machine, his hands aching, but the end result was worth it. The shoes were finally coming together. On the day of the shoot, Marcus found himself standing in front of a small studio in the city. His heart pounded as he stepped inside. There was Jasmine, sitting with her team, discussing the shoot. She waved when she saw him. "Marcus," she greeted him warmly. "We're so excited to work with you. These shoes look amazing. You've got something special." Marcus felt a rush of warmth in his chest. This wasn't a fluke. This was real. He had done it. As the photographer took pictures of the model wearing his shoes, Marcus couldn't help but smile. This was his moment, the moment when everything changed. The shoes, the recognition, the work, it was all coming together in a way he had never imagined possible. And as the day wore on, Marcus knew that this was just the beginning. He wasn't just the kid who had been mocked for his old shoes anymore. He was Marcus King, the designer who was about to take the world by storm. The next few weeks were a blur of excitement and exhaustion. Marcus could hardly believe what was happening. His shoes were featured in the photo shoot, and the results were stunning. Jasmine's followers went wild. The response was overwhelming. Comments flooded in asking about the shoes, asking where they could buy them, asking when the next drop would be. The buzz had reached an entirely new level, and with it came an undeniable sense of pressure. Marcus spent every waking moment working to keep up with the demand. He redesigned his website to handle the influx of orders, adding a professional touch with sleek photos of his shoes and information about the brand. He used social media to keep the momentum going, posting behind-the-scenes footage of him working, showing the process of making his shoes by hand. Each post garnered more likes, more shares, more followers. It felt like everything was falling into place, yet it was also clear that this was just the beginning. In the midst of all the chaos, Marcus found himself reflecting on how far he had come. Just a few months ago, he had been the kid sitting alone in the cafeteria, ridiculed for wearing shoes that didn't fit in. Now, he was the one being featured by a major influencer, his shoes being worn by people who had once overlooked him. But it wasn't just about the recognition. It wasn't about the fame or the followers. It was about proving something to himself, to the kid who had been told he would never make it, to the teenager who had been laughed at for dreaming too big. The shoes he had designed weren't just a product. They were a symbol of his resilience, his refusal to give up. Every stitch, every cut of leather, was a testament to his perseverance. One Saturday afternoon, after a particularly grueling week of fulfilling orders and meeting with suppliers, Marcus sat on the balcony of his apartment, watching the sunset. His phone buzzed, breaking the quiet moment. It was a text from his mom. "I'm so proud of you, baby. You've come so far. You've shown the world what you're made of. I always knew you had it in you." Marcus smiled as he read the message. It was simple, but it meant the world to him. His mom had always been his biggest supporter, and now, more than ever, he knew she was right. He had made it this far because he refused to listen to the doubts and the criticisms. He had followed his passion, and in doing so, had found his purpose. He couldn't deny that the journey hadn't been easy. There had been days when he had wanted to quit, days when he had felt like everything was falling apart. But with each challenge, he had only grown stronger. Each obstacle had taught him something valuable. The key, he had learned, wasn't avoiding failure, it was learning how to rise from it. Marcus had faced down rejection. He had fought through the skepticism. He had learned the hard way that success wasn't just handed to you, it had to be earned. But now, as he sat on the balcony, watching the sky change colors as the sun dipped below the horizon, he realized that he wasn't just looking at the end of one chapter of his life. He was looking at the beginning of something much bigger. His shoes weren't just a project anymore, they were the foundation of his future. The following month, Marcus was invited to his first major fashion event, a showcase for emerging streetwear designers. He had heard about the event for years but never imagined he would be one of the designers invited to present. The event was hosted by a renowned fashion collective in New York City, and the invitation came as both a surprise and a validation of everything he had worked for. On the day of the showcase, Marcus stood backstage, his hands trembling slightly as he adjusted the shoes he had carefully chosen for the event. His designs were getting more attention than he had ever thought possible, and now, he was about to step into a new world, a world where he wasn't the underdog anymore. He was no longer the kid with nothing. He was Marcus King, the designer who had built his dream from the ground up. "Are you ready?" Darnell asked, appearing beside him with a grin. "I think so," Marcus replied, forcing a smile. His nerves were getting the best of him. This was his moment, the one he had worked for, and he wasn't about to let it slip through his fingers. "You've got this, man. Just be yourself. Show them what you've got," Darnell encouraged. Marcus nodded, taking a deep breath. He stepped onto the runway, the bright lights blinding him for a moment before his eyes adjusted. His shoes were the highlight of the night, displayed on a sleek, polished floor beneath the spotlight. As the audience watched, Marcus felt the weight of their gaze. But it wasn't a weight that made him feel small, it was a weight that fueled him, pushed him forward. By the end of the night, Marcus was surrounded by fashion influencers, buyers, and designers, all eager to get a glimpse of his work. His shoes had captivated the room. Everyone wanted a piece of what he had created, and suddenly, Marcus realized that this wasn't just a dream anymore, it was a reality. In the weeks that followed, the brand exploded. Orders flooded in from across the country. Fashion publications featured his designs. He was interviewed by major outlets, and people who had once mocked him now sought his advice, asked to collaborate, and wanted to learn about his journey. The very same kids who had made fun of his shoes were now watching him closely, hoping to catch a glimpse of his next big move. Yet, for Marcus, the true reward wasn't in the recognition. It wasn't in the sales or the articles written about him. The real prize was in the knowledge that he had created something of his own, something that had started with nothing more than a pair of worn-out shoes and a dream. One night, as he sat in his studio, working on a new design, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on how far he had come. He thought about the people who had doubted him, the ones who had made fun of his shoes, and the ones who had told him it wasn't possible. In the end, it didn't matter. What mattered was that he had believed in himself. As his phone buzzed with another message from a potential collaborator, Marcus smiled. He was no longer the kid who had been mocked. He was the man who had built his future, step by step, stitch by stitch. The road to success had been long and filled with challenges, but Marcus knew one thing for sure, he wasn't done yet. He had only just begun. The excitement of his success at the fashion event in New York was still fresh, but Marcus knew that this was not the time to rest on his laurels. The world was watching, and now that he had the attention, he had to prove that he could maintain the momentum. The hype surrounding his designs was real, but Marcus understood that in the fast-paced world of fashion, what's in demand today could be forgotten tomorrow. He had always known that the road to success wouldn't be linear. What he had achieved so far felt like a blessing, but it also came with an enormous responsibility. His shoes were no longer just products, they were symbols of something greater. They represented his journey, his struggle, and the passion he had poured into every stitch. And now, he had to make sure that his brand stood for more than just great design, it had to stand for resilience, authenticity, and community. As Marcus sat in his studio, surrounded by designs, sketches, and piles of materials, he realized that the next step was going to be harder than he thought. Sure, he had made a name for himself with his shoes, but could he sustain this success long-term? Could he build a brand that would outlast the buzz and transform into something permanent? It was time to get serious about the business side of things. The first step, Marcus decided, was to take a hard look at his brand identity. What did he want his company to stand for? What did he want people to feel when they wore his shoes? He wanted them to feel powerful, confident, and unique, just like how he felt when he first designed those very shoes. He wanted his sneakers to symbolize overcoming adversity, breaking through societal expectations, and, most importantly, believing in your own potential, no matter where you came from. He started by revisiting his roots. He began to focus on the story behind the shoes, his story. He created a new slogan for the brand, born from the struggle, designed for the bold. It wasn't just a catchy phrase, it was the truth. Every pair of shoes he made was a testament to his journey, and he wanted his customers to feel connected to that story. But building a brand wasn't just about creating a compelling narrative, it was about creating a community. Marcus knew that he couldn't do this alone. He needed a team, a network of people who shared his vision and could help him grow. He started reaching out to other local creatives, photographers, stylists, and even other designers. He knew that collaboration was key. The fashion world thrived on connection, and Marcus was ready to build that network. One of the first people he contacted was his old friend, Darnell. Although Darnell had no experience in fashion, he had a keen business sense, and Marcus trusted his judgment. They sat down one afternoon at a local cafe, where Marcus laid out his vision for the brand. He wanted to make sure that the shoes weren't just high quality, they needed to be a reflection of the culture, of the people who wore them. "Darnell, I need help building this thing," Marcus said, leaning in closer. "I need someone who understands business, who can help me navigate all the logistics. I can design, I can create, but I need you to help me with everything else." Darnell listened carefully, then nodded. "I got you, bro. You know I believe in what you're doing. Let's build something that lasts. We'll start with the basics, get a business plan together, secure the right partnerships, and set up distribution. This isn't just about sneakers, Marcus. This is about creating a legacy." Those words, creating a legacy, stuck with Marcus. It wasn't just about a quick rise to the top. He wasn't trying to make a splash and then fade away. He wanted his brand to stand the test of time. He wanted to build something that his community could be proud of, something that would inspire the next generation of creators. But there were hurdles. No matter how committed Marcus was to building his brand, the business side of things was an entirely different beast. He had to deal with suppliers, manage production schedules, handle inventory, and most challenging of all, secure funding for the next phase of his brand's growth. Though his designs had gotten attention, Marcus knew that turning his brand into a sustainable business required more than just creativity, it required capital. He spent countless hours in meetings, reaching out to potential investors, trying to convince them that his brand was worth their money. Many of them were interested, but when they heard about Marcus's limited resources and the fact that he was still a small operation, their interest started to wane. The rejection was tough, and at times, it felt like he was back to square one. During one particularly discouraging meeting, Marcus was told, "It's a great idea, Marcus. But we don't think you're ready for this kind of growth. Maybe you should take a step back and focus on building more of a following first." That was when he realized something crucial: he didn't need investors to validate his success. He didn't need anyone's approval. His success had never come from outside validation, it had always been about believing in himself, regardless of what others thought. So instead of retreating, Marcus decided to take the risk. He reinvested all the profits he had made so far back into his business, pouring every ounce of energy and every dollar he had into growing the brand. He found a small loan to cover the costs of scaling up production. He reached out to friends, family, and even some of his customers, offering them a chance to invest in his brand in exchange for exclusive access to limited edition shoes. Slowly but surely, Marcus was building the foundation of his empire, one step at a time. One evening, as Marcus reviewed his sales numbers, he found that his persistence had finally paid off. His sales had doubled in the last month, and he had successfully expanded his production to meet the rising demand. His shoes were now available in select retail stores, and his online sales were booming. It wasn't easy, and it certainly wasn't quick, but he had built something real. Something sustainable. He had come a long way since the days of mocking classmates and self-doubt. Now, Marcus was not only a successful designer, he was a business owner, an entrepreneur, and an inspiration to anyone who had ever been told they couldn't do it. One night, while Marcus was working late, his phone buzzed again. It was a message from his mom. "I saw the new article in the paper. They're calling you the next big thing in fashion. I'm so proud of you, baby. You're changing the game." Marcus smiled as he read the message, his heart swelling with pride. It wasn't about the accolades or the media attention. It was about the journey, the growth, and the people who had been there for him from the start. His mom had always believed in him, even when he didn't believe in himself. And now, it was his turn to show the world what he was capable of. With each passing day, Marcus found himself juggling more responsibilities. The excitement of his brand's rapid growth was undeniable, but so was the weight of the pressure. When the spotlight shines bright, it casts long shadows, and Marcus was beginning to feel the growing pains of success. His brand was no longer just an idea, it was a full-blown business, with deadlines, orders, and expectations to meet. And with those expectations came a new set of challenges that threatened to test his limits. It was a Friday evening when it hit him the hardest. He had been working non-stop for weeks. Designing new lines, meeting with investors, handling production, and staying active on social media to maintain the buzz around his shoes. He had almost no time for himself anymore. There was always something that needed his attention, and every time he thought he had a moment to breathe, something new popped up. The phone call came as he was staring at his desk, trying to design the next collection. His eyes were sore, his mind foggy from exhaustion. It was Darnell, his business partner, and his tone was uncharacteristically serious. "Marcus, we need to talk." Marcus stood up, his heart racing. "What's going on?" "We've got a serious issue with production. The factory's behind on the latest batch. The delay's going to push back the release date for the new collection by weeks, and we've already promised some big names these sneakers by next month." Marcus ran a hand through his hair, feeling the weight of the situation. "What do we do? We've got to figure something out fast." "I'll get in touch with the factory manager, but we might need to make some tough decisions," Darnell replied, his voice full of concern. Marcus sat back down, feeling a sharp pang of stress. The pressure was mounting in ways he hadn't fully anticipated. The demands of growing his business had started to feel like a balancing act on the edge of a cliff. Every decision seemed to have higher stakes now, and every problem felt bigger than the last. He had dreamed of this moment for years, but now that he was in it, the reality of being a successful entrepreneur was taking its toll. There were no more easy days, no more quiet moments. The stakes were higher, and so was the cost of success. The next few days were a whirlwind of phone calls, late-night strategy sessions, and frantic attempts to solve the production issue. Marcus spent hours on the phone with manufacturers, asking for favors and exploring all possible solutions. But as the days passed, the reality of his situation set in. Things were falling apart faster than he could fix them. It wasn't just the production delays. There were new challenges cropping up at every turn. His website had crashed from the influx of orders, and his team was stretched thin trying to fulfill them. His social media accounts were flooded with questions and complaints about the delays, and though he tried to remain positive in his posts, it was hard to keep up the facade. The cracks in the operation were starting to show, and it was beginning to feel like there was no easy way to put everything back together. In the middle of this chaos, Marcus found himself questioning his decisions. He'd built his brand on passion, on a dream that had finally come true, but was it all worth it? Was it worth sacrificing his time, his mental health, and his peace of mind? Was this the price of success? One evening, after yet another stressful day of trying to put out fires, Marcus sat alone in his apartment. The silence was suffocating. For the first time in months, he felt like he had no control over his own life. His phone buzzed, and it was a message from Jasmine. "I know things are crazy right now, but I just wanted to remind you that you've got this. You built this from the ground up. Don't let the pressure make you forget how far you've come." Marcus stared at the message, feeling a lump in his throat. Jasmine's words were comforting, but they didn't change the fact that everything seemed to be falling apart around him. He had worked so hard to get to this point, and now it felt like the universe was throwing obstacles in his path at every turn. It wasn't just the external challenges that were overwhelming. It was the inner turmoil. The self-doubt. The fear that maybe he wasn't cut out for this after all. The next morning, Marcus woke up early. He had barely slept the night before, but his body knew that there was no time to rest. There were decisions to be made, and he couldn't afford to waste any more time. He looked at his reflection in the mirror, trying to gather his strength. His face looked tired, the weight of the stress heavy in his eyes. But then, something clicked. He remembered why he had started this journey in the first place. It wasn't for the money, the fame, or the recognition. It was because he wanted to create something meaningful, something that would make a difference in the world. He had faced obstacles before, he had grown up with them. And he had fought his way through every single one. Marcus knew that this moment, this challenge, was no different. It was just another test, another lesson in resilience. He couldn't let fear and doubt dictate his next steps. He had built his brand from the ground up, and he wasn't about to let it crumble because of a few setbacks. With a deep breath, Marcus called Darnell. "We need a new plan," Marcus said, his voice firm. Darnell didn't hesitate. "Let's figure it out." Over the next few days, Marcus and Darnell worked together to turn things around. They made tough decisions, cutting back on certain collections, prioritizing key orders, and streamlining production. They also reached out to their loyal customers, explaining the delays and offering them special discounts and exclusive access to future collections as a way to make up for it. It wasn't easy, but they were determined to stay transparent and maintain the trust of the people who had supported them from the start. The production issues were eventually resolved, though not without more challenges along the way. But through it all, Marcus learned a valuable lesson. Success wasn't just about the big wins, it was about how you handled the tough moments, how you faced adversity and pushed through it. And with that mindset, he knew that he could overcome anything. Weeks later, when the new collection finally dropped, it was met with even more excitement than before. The delays had only made the customers more eager, and the new designs were a hit. Sales surged, and the buzz around his brand reached new heights. Marcus had weathered the storm, and now his business was stronger for it. As he sat in his studio, looking at the latest batch of shoes ready for shipment, Marcus realized that the real cost of success wasn't the long hours, the sleepless nights, or the constant pressure. The real cost was the vulnerability, the willingness to put everything on the line, knowing that failure was always a possibility. But it was also the reward, the satisfaction of knowing that even in the hardest of times, he had the strength to keep going. For Marcus, that was what success truly meant. The next few months were a blur of activity. Marcus had pulled his business out of the fire, and now the momentum was finally in his favor again. Orders were rolling in, his brand was gaining more attention, and even some of the biggest fashion influencers were beginning to wear his sneakers. But despite all the success, something felt off. Marcus was still in his studio late one night, poring over sketches for his next collection. He had just wrapped up a meeting with the team, and while everything seemed to be going according to plan, there was a nagging feeling in his gut that wouldn't go away. For all the progress, he couldn't shake the feeling that he had somehow lost sight of the bigger picture. He set his pencil down and leaned back in his chair, letting out a deep sigh. The studio was quiet, save for the faint hum of the air conditioning. He had built this brand from nothing, but now that it was thriving, he was starting to question whether he was still living his truth. Was he still designing shoes that meant something? Or had he fallen into the trap of chasing popularity and profit? It wasn't that he didn't appreciate the success. Far from it. He had worked tirelessly to get here, and the fact that his shoes were now worn by some of the biggest names in the industry was surreal. But Marcus couldn't help but feel that there was something more he was meant to do, something bigger than just making shoes that people wanted to buy. He needed to reconnect with the heart of his brand, to rediscover the passion that had first sparked his journey. The breakthrough came unexpectedly, during a quiet afternoon when Marcus decided to take a step back from the hustle. He had been running at full speed for so long that he hadn't really given himself the time to reflect. That day, instead of heading into the studio, he went for a walk through his old neighborhood. The streets were familiar, the houses unchanged. He passed by the corner store where he used to buy snacks as a kid, the school he attended, and the basketball court where he spent hours playing with his friends. It was a reminder of where he had come from, of the challenges he had faced and overcome. And as he walked, he began to see the bigger picture. It wasn't just about the shoes. It was about the people. The ones who had supported him from the start, the ones who had believed in him when he didn't believe in himself. He had created something that resonated with them. Something that connected with the struggles and aspirations of those who had never had the same opportunities. Marcus wasn't just designing shoes. He was designing a symbol of resilience, of overcoming obstacles, and of proving that anyone, regardless of their background, could rise above the odds. That moment of clarity hit him like a wave. He didn't want his brand to just be a commercial success. He wanted it to be a movement. He wanted to use his platform to inspire others, to show that success wasn't just about making money, it was about making a difference. Returning to his studio that afternoon, Marcus felt reinvigorated. He immediately called Darnell. "I've got it," Marcus said, his voice full of energy. "We need to do more. We need to start focusing on giving back to the community. Let's launch a campaign that's not just about selling shoes. Let's create something that empowers people to keep pushing forward, no matter where they come from." Darnell was silent for a moment, then responded, "You're right. We've always said our brand was about more than just sneakers. This is the next step. But what exactly do you have in mind?" Marcus thought for a second, his mind racing. "I want to partner with organizations that help underprivileged kids. I want to create a program that teaches them skills, whether it's design, business, or something else, so they have a chance to succeed. Let's call it Step Up. Every time someone buys a pair of shoes, we'll donate a portion of the proceeds to fund educational programs for kids in need. We'll give them a chance to build a future for themselves." Darnell's voice cracked with emotion. "Marcus, that's huge. You're really going to do that?" "Absolutely," Marcus said. "We've built this brand on overcoming adversity, on pushing through when the world tells you no. Now it's time to help others do the same." The idea behind Step Up quickly gained traction. The more Marcus spoke about it, the more the team believed in its potential. It wasn't just about selling shoes, it was about creating a legacy that mattered. A brand that didn't just cater to the fashion conscious, but also to those who needed a hand up in life. As the campaign began to take shape, Marcus reached out to several nonprofits that focused on education and youth empowerment. Together, they formed a plan for how they could make a real difference. They began to promote the campaign on social media, sharing stories of kids who had overcome obstacles and achieved their dreams. The response was overwhelming. People didn't just want to buy sneakers, they wanted to be part of something bigger. They wanted to be part of a movement that stood for something meaningful. The first fundraiser under the Step Up campaign was a huge success. Marcus hosted a charity event in New York, where attendees could purchase exclusive limited edition sneakers designed specifically for the event. The proceeds went directly to funding educational programs for underprivileged children. The event was packed with celebrities, influencers, and everyday people who believed in the cause. Marcus felt a sense of fulfillment he had never known before. This wasn't just about shoes anymore, it was about changing lives. At the event, Marcus gave a speech. His words were simple, but powerful. This brand was built on the idea that anyone, no matter where they come from, can make something of themselves. Step Up is our way of giving back, of ensuring that the next generation has the tools they need to succeed. It's about showing the world that we're stronger when we rise together. As he spoke, the crowd cheered. Marcus could feel the energy in the room, the support, the unity. For the first time in a long while, he felt like he was exactly where he was meant to be. In the weeks that followed, the Step Up campaign continued to gain momentum. Marcus found himself constantly balancing his time between running the business and overseeing the program. But he didn't mind. The passion he had for his brand had been reignited, and now it felt like his work had a deeper purpose. Every sale wasn't just about profit, it was about giving someone else the chance to succeed. And as Marcus watched more and more kids benefit from the program, he knew that this was just the beginning. He had gone from creating sneakers to creating opportunities. He had started with a dream, but now he was building a legacy that would last far beyond the shoes he designed. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself on a whirlwind tour, promoting the Step Up campaign and visiting the various community centers and nonprofits his brand had partnered with. He spoke at schools, attended community outreach events, and even spent time mentoring young entrepreneurs who were starting their own businesses. Everywhere he went, people were moved by his story, by his commitment to giving back, and by the change he was fostering in his own community. But the real impact of the Step Up campaign was something Marcus hadn't anticipated, the ripple effect it would have on others. As more and more people became involved in the initiative, it seemed like everyone wanted to do their part. Sneakers were just the beginning. Now, the Step Up movement was growing, and it wasn't just about selling shoes anymore, it was about fostering a culture of mentorship, opportunity, and empowerment. It was at a youth event in Harlem that Marcus truly realized the scope of what he had started. He was standing in front of a crowd of eager faces, young people from all walks of life who had come to hear his story and learn from his experiences. As he looked out over the room, he could see how hungry they were for a chance to break free from the cycle of poverty and make something of themselves. They didn't need just another handout, they needed someone to show them what was possible. Every time I see young people like you, I'm reminded of my own journey, Marcus said, his voice steady yet filled with emotion. When I was your age, I had no idea what the future would hold. I just knew that I had to keep going, no matter how hard things got. And now, I'm standing here, sharing this with you. Because I believe in you. I believe that with the right tools and the right support, you can achieve anything. The room was silent, hanging on his every word. This campaign, Step Up, is more than just about shoes, Marcus continued. It's about showing you that there's always a way out, always a path forward. I want to help give you the tools to succeed. And it's not just about me. It's about all of us working together to lift each other up. As the crowd erupted into applause, Marcus felt a surge of pride. This was bigger than him. This was about creating a movement, a culture of support, where young people were empowered to chase their dreams, just like he had done. The success of Step Up had not only bolstered the reputation of his brand but also cemented Marcus's role as a leader in his community. With every sneaker sold, a portion of the profits went directly into educational initiatives, providing mentorship and access to resources that would help these kids achieve their goals. Marcus had found a way to turn his personal success into a force for good, and it was working. But the campaign's ripple effect wasn't limited to just the youth it helped. As more people learned about the initiative, many other businesses began to take notice. They saw how powerful it could be to tie social impact to their brand, to create something that was not only profitable but also purpose-driven. Marcus's success was inspiring a new wave of social entrepreneurship, where success wasn't defined solely by the bottom line but by the positive change one could bring to the world. One afternoon, as Marcus was meeting with his team to discuss the next phase of Step Up, his phone rang. It was a call he had been waiting for, but wasn't sure would ever come. It was from the head of a major global fashion brand, a brand that had, until now, been an elusive dream. Marcus, the voice on the other end of the line said, "I've been following the Step Up campaign, and I have to say, we're impressed with what you've done. Your story, your mission, it's powerful. We want to explore a potential partnership." Marcus's heart skipped a beat. This was the kind of call he had dreamed of receiving, an opportunity to take his brand to new heights. The partnership would provide access to a larger audience, global distribution, and the financial backing needed to expand the impact of Step Up. But Marcus wasn't naive. He knew that bigger partnerships often meant compromises. "I appreciate the interest," Marcus said carefully, trying to temper his excitement. "But we're very protective of the vision we've built. The heart of Step Up is about authenticity and giving back to the community. If we partner, it has to align with our values. We're not just about selling sneakers, we're about changing lives." There was a brief silence on the other end of the line before the voice responded, "We understand. Let's discuss how we can make that work." The offer was tempting, but Marcus knew he couldn't make any decisions without careful thought. The partnership could take his brand to the next level, but it also carried the risk of diluting the message that had made his company successful in the first place. Could he maintain the authenticity of Step Up while partnering with a global giant? It was a question he didn't take lightly. Marcus spent several sleepless nights pondering the offer. He spoke to his team, his family, and Jasmine, trying to get a sense of what the right decision would be. He didn't want to lose sight of what made his brand special, the sense of community, the personal connection, and the belief that success was about more than just profit. But he also knew that this could be the breakthrough he needed to reach more people, to make a greater impact. After days of reflection, Marcus made a decision. He would negotiate the deal, but only on his terms. He would not compromise the integrity of Step Up. The global brand would need to respect the mission, contribute to the cause, and give back in meaningful ways. If they weren't willing to make that commitment, then the deal was off the table. When the contract was finally signed, it was a defining moment for Marcus and his brand. He had achieved something few could have imagined, a partnership that would allow Step Up to scale and reach even more communities while staying true to its roots. The campaign continued to grow, expanding internationally and providing even more opportunities for young people to pursue their dreams. But despite the growth, Marcus remained grounded. He never lost sight of where he came from or what truly mattered. Success, he realized, wasn't about how far his brand had come or how much money he made. It was about the difference he could make in the lives of others. It was about creating a movement that didn't just change the fashion industry but changed lives for the better. As the Step Up campaign went global, Marcus watched with pride as his vision unfolded before him. The ripple effect he had started was now a wave, reaching further than he could have ever imagined. He had built a brand, yes, but more importantly, he had built a legacy. And as he looked out over the city from his office window, Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. He had come a long way from the boy with dreams of designing sneakers. Now, he was a man on a mission, one that would continue to inspire, empower, and uplift for generations to come. The months following the signing of the partnership deal with the global fashion brand were a whirlwind for Marcus. The brand's international reach gave Step Up a platform that was unimaginable just a year ago. Orders for his sneakers were pouring in from countries all over the world, and media outlets were clamoring to tell his story. Yet, despite all the newfound attention, Marcus remained vigilant about keeping the mission of Step Up at the heart of his brand. There were days when it felt like everything was moving at a rapid pace, and Marcus had to constantly remind himself that this success was more than just about scaling up, this was a movement that was helping real people. Behind the sleek brand campaigns, the glossy magazine covers, and the influencer endorsements, Marcus knew that the core of what he was doing remained unchanged. But as Step Up expanded internationally, a new challenge began to emerge. How could he maintain the integrity of the brand while appealing to a global market that might not always share the same values or understand the heart of the campaign? One afternoon, Marcus was seated in a high-rise conference room in London, surrounded by representatives from the global brand. He had flown in to attend a meeting about expanding the Step Up campaign across Europe. As the discussion shifted to the potential for profit maximization, Marcus felt a familiar unease creeping up on him. They were discussing marketing strategies for the campaign, and he could tell that the team was focused heavily on consumer behavior and trends. "We've analyzed the market," one of the executives said, flipping through slides filled with data and projections. "The key to successful expansion is tailoring our message to fit the desires of the European market. People are buying into the exclusivity of the sneaker culture. This is a luxury product now. The more we position it that way, the more we can increase demand." Marcus leaned forward, furrowing his brow. He had heard this pitch before, and while it made business sense, something didn't sit right with him. He cleared his throat. "I hear you," Marcus began, his voice steady but firm, "but I need to make something clear. Step Up isn't just about luxury or exclusivity, it's about accessibility, community, and giving back. Our mission is to help kids from underprivileged backgrounds succeed, not create a product that only the rich can buy. I'm not willing to sacrifice the core values of this brand for profits." There was a brief silence around the table, and for a moment, Marcus wondered if he had made a mistake. But then one of the executives nodded, acknowledging the sentiment. "I understand, Marcus," she said, her tone respectful. "We'll find a way to keep that ethos intact, but we also need to ensure the brand stays competitive on a global scale. We have to strike the right balance." After the meeting, Marcus took a walk through London's bustling streets. The contrast between the sleek, high-end stores and the less glamorous areas of the city was stark. He passed by small shops, where young people gathered in the streets, chatting and laughing. There were moments when it seemed like the world was moving too fast, like the mission he had fought so hard to build was slipping away. He didn't want to be just another brand that catered to the wealthy, he wanted to remain authentic, to stay true to his roots. As he continued walking, he realized that the global stage wasn't just about expanding sales, it was about expanding the movement. He had to ensure that every step of this expansion included the people he originally set out to help. There had to be a way to maintain the integrity of Step Up while growing his reach. That night, back in his hotel room, Marcus pulled up a map on his laptop, pinpointing the areas where his brand had the most traction. He was encouraged to see that the campaign was resonating in places he hadn't expected: small towns, underrepresented communities, and cities where people appreciated the message of resilience and empowerment. But there were still many regions where the brand was seen primarily as a luxury item, disconnected from the original message. The next morning, Marcus convened a meeting with Darnell and the core team. He wasn't interested in traditional corporate strategies. He needed a plan that stayed grounded in the mission while allowing for international growth. "I want to launch an initiative in every new market we enter," Marcus said, his voice resolute. "We can't just sell sneakers. We need to show people that we're committed to making a difference, not just selling products. We'll establish community projects, mentorship programs, and educational initiatives that align with the values of Step Up. This isn't just about us expanding, it's about creating partnerships with local organizations that are already doing the work. We'll make sure we're embedded in the communities we enter. Darnell's eyes lit up. I love that, Marcus. So we're not just selling the brand, we're bringing the movement with us. Exactly, Marcus replied, a smile slowly forming on his face. If we're going global, we're doing it with integrity. We can't let the success of the business overshadow the mission we've built. We need to be the brand that people know isn't just about making a profit, it's about making an impact. In the months that followed, Marcus and his team rolled out the next phase of the Step Up expansion plan. They launched educational programs and mentorship opportunities in several key cities around the world, including Paris, Berlin, and Cape Town. These initiatives were tailored to the specific needs of each region, but the underlying message was always the same: success wasn't just for the privileged few, it was for anyone willing to work hard and push past their circumstances. To ensure that the program stayed true to their mission, Marcus made it a point to personally visit these locations. He spent time with local organizations, meeting the young people who would benefit from the programs and getting to know the community leaders who were already making a difference. He didn't want Step Up to be a name on a sponsorship plaque, he wanted it to be a movement that people felt deeply connected to, something they could see and touch in their everyday lives. During one of his visits to Paris, Marcus met with a group of young entrepreneurs at a local community center. They were working on their own startup projects, many of which focused on fashion, technology, and sustainable living. The group reminded him of himself, ambitious, determined, and eager to make a change. Marcus, one of the young men said, when we first heard about your brand, we were skeptical. A lot of us thought it was just another luxury sneaker. But then we saw the Step Up campaign, and we realized you're doing more than just selling shoes, you're giving us a chance to create something ourselves. You're showing us that it's possible. Marcus smiled. That's what I want. I want to show you that it's possible. It's not about how much money you have, or where you come from, it's about what you do with the opportunities you're given. The Step Up campaign was no longer just about sneakers. It had become a platform for change, an ongoing story of resilience, empowerment, and community building. As the brand expanded internationally, it didn't just capture the attention of fashion lovers and sneakerheads, it inspired a generation of young people who were determined to rise above their circumstances. Marcus's decision to maintain the core values of Step Up while expanding globally was paying off. His brand was no longer a luxury product, it was a movement that people could believe in. And as the campaign continued to grow, Marcus knew that this was only the beginning. The global stage was just one part of the story, but the real work, the real impact, was being made in the communities where it mattered most. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough? With the success of the Step Up campaign taking root around the world, Marcus found himself in an unexpected position, juggling the demands of his rapidly expanding business while grappling with the personal sacrifices that came with it. His commitment to the mission was unwavering, but the pressures of scaling a global brand were beginning to weigh on him. Gone were the quiet nights at his apartment, the simple moments of reflection when he could think about his next steps. Now, his days were packed with meetings, interviews, and strategic decisions that stretched him thin. It was as if his entire life had become a blur of constant motion, and in the middle of it all, Marcus found himself wondering if he had lost touch with the very thing that had driven him in the first place. The first sign that something wasn't quite right came during a late-night meeting with his team. Marcus had flown in from Tokyo after a whirlwind press tour, and despite the exhaustion that weighed on his body, he pushed through to attend the strategy session. He was seated at the head of the table, surrounded by his closest advisors. The topic at hand was crucial: expanding into South America, specifically Brazil and Argentina. The potential was huge, and the business team was eager to capitalize on it. We've got the brand recognition, we've got the partnerships in place, Darnell was saying, tapping through slides on his laptop. We just need to finalize the marketing campaign and logistics to hit these markets hard. It's going to be big. We can push the limited edition sneakers, make a statement with a huge release. Marcus nodded but couldn't shake the feeling of weariness that clung to him. He wanted to be excited about this next step, but all he could think about was how long the days were becoming, how much he was missing at home with his family, and how little time he had to reflect on the deeper purpose of his work. "I hear you, Darnell, but," Marcus began slowly, his voice filled with a fatigue that had become all too familiar. "Are we still sticking to our community outreach plans? I know the sales numbers are important, but what about the schools we're supposed to partner with in these regions? What about the kids we promised to mentor?" Darnell paused, sensing the tension in Marcus's tone. "Of course, we're not forgetting that," he said, though there was a slight edge of defensiveness in his voice. "But we can't afford to fall behind in the market. We've got to strike while the iron's hot." Marcus sat back in his chair, his mind racing. The last thing he wanted was for Step Up to become another corporate machine, just another brand in a sea of flashy sneakers. He wanted to be something different, a movement, not just a product. But the pressures of running a business at this scale were forcing him to make difficult decisions. Could he balance his commitment to the cause with the demands of his growing empire? A few days later, after the meeting had ended, Marcus found himself walking through the empty hallways of the office. The building, once a place where he felt inspired, now felt hollow. It was as though he had become a stranger to the mission that had once driven him. The brand was booming, yes, but the constant grind of expansion had left little room for reflection, for the kind of deep work that had originally motivated him to start this journey. That night, after the team had gone home, Marcus called Jasmine. She had been his anchor through everything, the late nights, the setbacks, the moments when everything felt like it might collapse. He needed her voice now more than ever. "Hey," he said, his voice quiet, tired. "I don't know if I can keep doing this. I'm stretched so thin, Jazz. The brand's growing, but I feel like I'm losing myself in the process. I've barely seen you. I haven't had a moment to just sit and think. It's like I'm running in circles." Jasmine listened patiently, her voice soothing through the phone. "Marcus, I get it. I've been watching you, and I can tell how hard you're working. But you're not alone in this. You've got a team that believes in you, and you don't have to carry it all on your shoulders. Maybe it's time to take a step back and reassess what you're really trying to accomplish. Is this still about the mission? Or are we just chasing numbers?" Her words hit Marcus harder than he expected. Jasmine was right. He had become so consumed with the outward success of the brand that he had neglected the inner work, the reason he started all of this in the first place. "I'm not sure anymore," he admitted. "It feels like every day is about growing, expanding, selling more. But what's the point if we lose sight of why we started?" There was a long pause before Jasmine responded. "Maybe it's time to recalibrate, Marcus. Focus on the people you're trying to help. Focus on the mission, not the numbers. You've got a chance to change the world, don't forget that." The next day, Marcus took a few hours off. He walked around his neighborhood, a place he hadn't really taken the time to enjoy in months. The sounds of the street, the bustle of the city, it was comforting, grounding. He passed by local shops, people chatting on the corner, and families gathered at the park. For the first time in a while, he could hear the heartbeat of the community, the people he had set out to serve. As he stood on a street corner, watching life unfold around him, Marcus realized something important. It wasn't the scale of his business that mattered, it was the lives he was touching. That Step Up brand was about more than selling shoes. It was about creating real, tangible change. He had to remember that, especially as the brand expanded. Numbers and profits were important, yes, but not at the expense of the people who needed him. That night, he made a decision. The following morning, he called an emergency meeting with Darnell, his head of marketing, and his other key team members. "I've been thinking a lot," Marcus began, his tone firmer than it had been in weeks. "We need to refocus on what's important. The community initiatives can't be sidelined for profits. I know the growth has been fast, but we're going to double down on our social impact efforts. I want every new market we enter to be connected to our community outreach. We're going to prioritize the people we promise to help. It's not about getting the highest margins, it's about creating lasting change. Darnell looked slightly surprised but nodded. Got it. We'll make it happen. Good, Marcus replied, feeling a weight lift off his shoulders. We're in this for the long haul. It's not about fast growth, it's about building something that lasts. The next phase of the Step Up campaign was a direct reflection of Marcus's renewed commitment. Every new market he entered came with a robust social program that aligned with the mission of the brand. In South America, for example, Marcus partnered with local youth organizations to provide mentorship and access to education, ensuring that the communities where the brand expanded saw tangible benefits beyond just purchasing sneakers. For Marcus, this was a turning point. He had found a way to balance growth with purpose, to ensure that success was not just measured by the bottom line but by the positive impact he could create in the world. As the campaign continued to grow, Marcus knew that his journey wasn't just about the destination, it was about staying true to the core values that had made it all possible. And that, he realized, was worth more than any profit margin. Despite the whirlwind of business deals, global expansion, and ever-increasing expectations, Marcus knew that there were still moments when the weight of success felt unbearable. The pressures of maintaining his vision while satisfying the demands of investors, partners, and the global audience had begun to take a toll on him. Yet, at the core of everything, Marcus still clung to the roots of Step Up, the vision of helping underprivileged communities and empowering young people to pursue their dreams, no matter the odds. It was a crisp autumn morning when Marcus decided to return home to Atlanta, where it had all begun. A visit back to the neighborhood he had grown up in seemed like the right thing to do. He needed to reconnect with the reason behind everything, the pulse of the community that had once inspired him to create something bigger than himself. As he boarded the flight back, Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the pressure in his chest lighten just a little. For the first time in months, he wasn't thinking about meetings or product launches. He was thinking about the kids he had promised to help. He was thinking about the change he had promised to bring. The streets of Atlanta looked different than they had when he was growing up. The city had changed, and so had he. But as Marcus drove through the familiar neighborhoods, past the parks and stores where he had once spent hours dreaming of a better life, he couldn't help but smile. This place had shaped him. It had given him the strength to chase his dreams, even when everything seemed impossible. After settling in at a local hotel, Marcus made his way to the community center where he had spent much of his time as a teenager. The center had been a refuge for him back then, a place where he could escape the difficulties at home and focus on something more meaningful. He knew that the center had continued to support kids in the neighborhood, offering after-school programs, tutoring, and sports teams. When he entered, he was greeted by familiar faces, old mentors, volunteers, and even some of the kids who had been coming through the program when Marcus was young. The center had grown in size since his time there, but the heart of it remained unchanged. "Marcus," a voice called out from the corner. It was Ms. Thompson, the woman who had run the center back when he was a teenager. She had been one of the first people to believe in him. "Well, I'll be. Look at you. You're a grown man now. Ms. Thompson," Marcus said with a grin, walking over to her. "It's good to see you. I've been meaning to come by for a while." "You've been busy, I gather," she said with a knowing look. "But you know, we've been keeping the lights on here, thanks to people like you." Marcus felt a surge of warmth at her words. It was the first time in months that he had felt truly grounded, standing in the place where it all began. "I want to give back to this place," he said quietly, the weight of his promise still heavy on his heart. "I've been running Step Up all over the world, but I haven't forgotten where it all started. I want to make sure kids here get the same opportunities one had, if not more." Ms. Thompson nodded, her eyes softening. "I knew you'd come back for us. You've always had that heart, Marcus. You never forgot where you came from. That afternoon, Marcus spent hours at the center, speaking with the kids and listening to their stories. There were so many talented, driven young people in the room, eager to make something of themselves. Yet, despite their potential, many still struggled with the same obstacles that Marcus had faced: poverty, a lack of resources, and the absence of a roadmap for success. It was during one of these conversations that a young boy, no older than 16, caught Marcus's attention. His name was Elijah, and like Marcus had been at that age, he was brimming with ambition but stuck in a cycle of limited opportunities. Elijah's dream was to design sneakers, his passion was fashion, but he had no idea how to break into the industry. "I see your designs, Elijah," Marcus said, nodding toward the sketchbook the boy was holding. "You've got something special. Have you thought about pursuing this?" Elijah's eyes lit up. "I've always wanted to, but it's hard, man. I don't have the right connections. I don't know anyone in the industry." Marcus smiled, remembering his own journey. "I didn't know anyone either. But that's the thing, sometimes you just have to take the leap. If you're willing to work for it, there's always a way in." He paused, then looked at Ms. Thompson. "I'd like to help him get started. Let's make sure Elijah gets access to the tools he needs to turn this passion into a career. Whether it's mentorship or resources, let's make it happen." Ms. Thompson beamed. "You're doing more than just sending a check, Marcus. You're changing lives. That's the kind of impact we need." As Marcus left the community center that day, something inside him had shifted. The visit had reignited a fire that had been flickering but not fully alive in his heart for some time. It wasn't just about making money or growing a business anymore. It was about creating a ripple effect, giving back to the community, inspiring the next generation of dreamers, and ensuring that they had the opportunities he hadn't always had. The following week, Marcus returned to the office with a renewed sense of purpose. He sat down with Darnell and the rest of the team to discuss new initiatives for Step Up. This time, he wasn't just focused on expanding the brand. He wanted to ensure that the community outreach programs were fully integrated into the global expansion. He was committed to ensuring that, as the brand reached new markets, the mission of helping young people would stay at the forefront. "We're going to do something big, Darnell," Marcus said, his tone serious. "We're not just launching products, we're launching opportunities. We're going to build mentorship programs, provide scholarships, and create pathways for kids to break into the sneaker and fashion industries. We're going to show the world what Step Up really stands for." Darnell nodded, impressed by Marcus's renewed determination. "I like that. Let's do it. Let's make sure the mission stays at the heart of everything." As Marcus moved forward with the plan, he realized that the real value of his brand wasn't in the products or the revenue, it was in the impact he could have on the lives of young people. The path ahead was still filled with challenges, but Marcus was no longer driven by the desire for fame or money. He was driven by something deeper, the need to make a real difference. That evening, as Marcus sat in his office, reflecting on everything that had brought him to this point, he felt a profound sense of peace. The road ahead would be long, and there would be moments of doubt and difficulty. But he had come full circle. He had returned to the roots of his mission, and that made all the difference. And as he stared out the window, watching the lights of the city twinkle in the distance, he knew that his journey was far from over. This was just the beginning. The impact of Marcus's return to Atlanta had been immediate. His visit to the community center, the conversations with local youth, and his renewed commitment to the brand's social mission had all rekindled his passion. He returned to his team with a clear vision. Step Up was more than just a sneaker company, it was a movement that could transform lives. But with that vision came challenges, many of which Marcus hadn't anticipated. As the brand continued to grow, the complexities of managing a rapidly expanding business became more pronounced. There were new partnerships to navigate, international markets to explore, and a growing sense of responsibility for the young people who were looking to him for guidance. As the weeks passed, Marcus found himself grappling with an unexpected issue: corporate pressure. While his team, including Darnell, supported his mission, not everyone in the business world shared his commitment to social impact. Investors, in particular, were beginning to express concerns over the company's balance between profit and purpose. They wanted results, and they wanted them fast. "Marcus, we need to talk," Darnell said, his voice tense as he knocked on Marcus's office door one morning. "It's the investors, they're starting to ask tough questions. They're not seeing enough return on some of the social initiatives we've put in place." Marcus sighed, sitting back in his chair. He'd known this was coming. As much as he wanted to focus on giving back and making an impact, the bottom line still mattered, especially to the investors who had financed much of Step Up's growth. "What are they saying exactly?" Marcus asked, leaning forward. "They're worried about profitability," Darnell replied, pacing slightly. "We're doing well, but they want us to prioritize growth over community outreach. There's a concern that we're spreading ourselves too thin with these social programs. They want to see more direct returns." Marcus stared out of the window, the weight of the situation pressing on him. He had always believed that success wasn't just measured by money. It was about creating something meaningful, about leaving a legacy. But now, with the brand growing at such a rapid pace, it was clear that keeping everyone happy, investors, customers, and the people he was trying to help, was becoming increasingly difficult. "Tell them I'll be in touch soon," Marcus said finally. "I need to think about this." That afternoon, Marcus sat alone in his office, going over the numbers in front of him. The projections were good, but not great, especially when it came to the social initiatives. Programs like mentorship, scholarships, and community outreach were valuable, but they weren't generating immediate returns. And with each passing month, the pressure to show profitability was mounting. Marcus was no stranger to hard decisions, but this one felt different. For years, he had dreamed of building a business that could change the world. And now, with that dream realized, it felt like he was at a crossroads. The world he had built was asking him to choose between his values and his ambition. Later that week, Marcus attended a high-profile business conference in New York City, where he was scheduled to speak on a panel about the future of brand-driven social change. The audience was filled with executives, entrepreneurs, and investors, all eager to hear how a young black entrepreneur had managed to build a multimillion-dollar brand while staying true to his mission. The panel was hosted in a sleek, modern venue that spoke to the very world Marcus was now a part of. The stage was set with glowing lights, large screens, and an eager audience. As Marcus sat on stage, waiting for his turn to speak, he looked out over the crowd. It was hard not to feel a sense of pride, but also a sense of unease. When it was his turn, he stood up, adjusting his microphone. The room grew quiet, and all eyes were on him. "Thank you for having me here today," Marcus began. "When I started Step Up, it wasn't about sneakers. It was about changing lives. I come from a community where, growing up, I didn't have access to the same opportunities that others did. And now, I'm building a brand that not only creates products but also creates real change for the people who need it most." He paused for a moment, allowing the words to resonate. "But the truth is, it's hard," Marcus continued. "It's hard to balance profitability with purpose. It's hard to make the decisions that will make investors happy while also staying true to your mission. We live in a world where impact is measured by numbers and margins, and it's easy to lose sight of why you started." There was a hushed silence in the room. Marcus could feel the weight of the moment, the tension between what he knew to be true and the reality of the business world he now inhabited. "I'm at a crossroads right now," he said, his voice steady. "I want to build a business that lasts. But I also want to ensure that Step Up remains a force for good. So I'm asking myself, how do we grow without losing sight of our values? How do we make the impact we want to make, while also staying profitable enough to keep pushing forward?" The audience was quiet for a moment, and then a few heads began to nod, signaling a shared understanding. Marcus knew that his words weren't just resonating with the people in the room, they were part of a larger conversation happening in boardrooms and living rooms around the world. After the panel, Marcus received numerous messages from other entrepreneurs and investors who admired his honesty. Many expressed their support for his vision and encouraged him to stay true to his mission. But the truth remained, the path forward wouldn't be easy. A few days later, as Marcus sat in his office with Darnell and his financial advisors, he made a difficult decision. "We're going to keep pushing forward with our social programs," Marcus said, his voice firm. "But we're going to reframe how we present them. We'll showcase the tangible results, not just the feel-good stories. We'll tie community impact directly to sales, showing the world that doing good can also be good for business. We're not going to hide our mission behind flashy marketing, we're going to make it part of our DNA." Darnell nodded, understanding the gravity of Marcus's words. "It's a bold move, but it could work. We'll make sure every campaign, every initiative, ties back to the community. We'll show people that this isn't just a brand, it's a movement." Marcus took a deep breath, feeling the weight of his decision. It was a compromise, but it was one that he could live with. He had found a way to stay true to his values without sacrificing the growth of the company. As the months passed, Marcus continued to refine the approach. The Step Up brand not only remained a success, but it began to grow in new, meaningful ways. The brand's message resonated with a larger audience, people who were eager to see businesses prioritize impact alongside profits. Marcus's decision to shift gears had worked. But Marcus knew this was just the beginning. The real challenge was not in the growth of the business, it was in maintaining the balance between purpose and profit. And that, he realized, was the true test of success. The phone calls, emails, and constant flow of meetings had become a part of Marcus's daily routine. The pressure to grow, step up, and keep pace with the industry's demands had reached a fever pitch. Still, he remained resolute. The latest strategy to align profit with purpose was showing signs of success. Not only had the brand managed to secure its position in new markets, but the impact-driven initiatives were starting to generate buzz on social media. People were noticing. But with success came new challenges. Marcus found himself caught in a whirlwind of media interviews, conferences, and business opportunities. The constant travel, the never-ending demands on his time, and the weight of being the face of a movement were beginning to take their toll. He was no longer just a young entrepreneur trying to make it big, he had become a symbol, a beacon of hope for those who believed in the possibility of creating change through business. The question that haunted him now was, how far could he push this vision without losing himself in the process? It was a Wednesday morning when Marcus received a call from his childhood friend, Jason. Jason had always been there for him, from their days playing basketball at the local park to their late-night talks about what they'd do if they ever made it big. Marcus had kept in touch with him over the years, but lately, their conversations had become fewer and farther between. Jason had always understood Marcus's dreams and was one of the few who didn't try to mold him into something he wasn't. "Yo, man, you good?" Jason's voice crackled through the phone. Marcus let out a long sigh. "I'm tired, bro, really tired. I'm pulled in 100 different directions, and every time I try to focus on the vision, something else demands my attention. I don't know how much longer I can keep this up." Jason paused, the weight of his words evident even through the phone. "Man, I get it. You've been running non-stop, and I can see how much it's taking out of you. But listen, remember why you started this. It was never just about building a business. It was about something bigger. You're on the right path, Marcus. Just don't lose yourself in the process." Marcus rubbed his eyes, feeling the exhaustion settling deeper. "I don't know how to do that anymore. Every time I try to take a step back, there's someone else who needs something from me. I'm starting to forget why I started Step Up in the first place." Jason's voice softened. "You're still doing it, man. You're changing lives. And that's bigger than any deal or partnership you could ever close. But you've got to take care of yourself first. If you burn out, everything else is going to come crashing down. Don't forget your roots. Find your balance again. Marcus leaned back in his chair, taking a deep breath. Jason's words stuck with him, and for the first time in a long while, he allowed himself to reflect on everything that had happened. He hadn't been to his old neighborhood in weeks. He hadn't seen the faces of the young people he was trying to help. The mission had become blurred behind the corporate obligations, and he knew it was time to reconnect with what truly mattered. Later that week, Marcus made the decision to take a short break from the office. He needed to return to Atlanta, spend some time in the community, and remind himself of the mission. Darnell and the team were supportive, knowing that Marcus's clarity and vision had been the backbone of the company's success. If he needed to recharge, they would respect that. On a quiet Friday afternoon, Marcus boarded a plane to Atlanta. He spent the next few days visiting the same places he had returned to in the past, his old neighborhood, the community center, the local park where he had first dreamed of starting his business. It was during these visits that he began to feel the weight of his responsibility. Every young face he met, every handshake, and every conversation reminded him why he had chosen to go down this path. It was in the community center again, standing in front of a room full of eager young people, that Marcus had an epiphany. He watched as the kids poured their hearts into everything they did, whether it was designing, drawing, playing basketball, or speaking about their dreams. It wasn't just about sneakers. It wasn't even just about giving back to the community. It was about creating a platform for these kids to show the world who they were. And in turn, they would show the world that success didn't have to follow the same old script. Later that evening, Marcus sat down with Ms. Thompson, the same woman who had been there for him all those years ago. She had watched him grow from a teenager with big dreams into the man who now ran a multi-million-dollar brand. As they spoke, Marcus realized something. "I've been so focused on expanding the business, chasing numbers and deals," he said, looking down at his hands. "I've forgotten what truly matters, the people we're helping. The lives we're changing. I've been so caught up in the next big thing that I lost sight of the reason I started this." Ms. Thompson smiled warmly, placing a hand on his shoulder. "You're still doing the work, Marcus. You're still making a difference. But sometimes you need to pause and see the bigger picture. You're doing exactly what you were meant to do. Don't lose sight of that." Marcus nodded, feeling a deep sense of relief. She was right. He wasn't failing. In fact, he was doing more than he had ever imagined. But he had to take a step back to refocus on the heart of his mission. It wasn't about making more money or signing bigger contracts, it was about the ripple effect he was creating. It was about giving others the same chance he had been given, the chance to change their lives. When Marcus returned to the office a few days later, he was a changed man. He had found the clarity he had been searching for. He met with Darnell and the rest of the leadership team and shared his new vision, one that focused on not just growing the business, but growing the community he had promised to serve. "We're not just here to sell sneakers," Marcus said, his voice steady with purpose. "We're here to empower the next generation. We're going to shift the way we operate. We're going to make sure that every decision we make is rooted in the impact we can have on young people, not just our bottom line. We're going to focus on mentorship, education, and making sure we're giving back in ways that are meaningful." Darnell, sensing the shift in Marcus's tone, smiled. "That's the Marcus I know. Let's do it. Let's make sure we're always staying true to the vision." As the months went on, Step Up continued to grow, but this time, with a renewed sense of purpose. Marcus focused more on the community initiatives, creating more scholarships, and mentoring young people who had the same dreams he once had. As the company expanded into new markets, they ensured that local communities benefited directly from the brand's success. The ripple effect of Marcus's decision to return to his roots was far-reaching. Step Up didn't just change lives, it became a symbol of what was possible when you stayed true to your values, no matter the pressure. Marcus knew that the road ahead would still have its challenges, but he was ready. He had found his balance. And now, more than ever, he was focused on the mission, to inspire, to empower, and to give back. It had been a year since Marcus returned from his short retreat to Atlanta, and the brand was evolving in ways he hadn't imagined. Step Up had begun to outgrow its initial identity as just a sneaker company. It was no longer just about creating stylish shoes, it had become a movement, a beacon for young, aspirational individuals who believed that they too could break barriers and rise above their circumstances. The message was loud and clear: you could step up no matter where you came from. But as with any success story, growth brought new challenges. This time, the challenge came in the form of a direct competitor, a well-funded, globally recognized company that was launching a new line of sneakers aimed at the very same community that Step Up had built its brand on. The market was shifting, and the competition was fierce. Marcus sat at the head of a large conference table in a sleek boardroom. His team was gathered around him: Darnell, the marketing team, financial advisors, and several others. Everyone's eyes were fixed on him, waiting for the next move. The competitor's campaign had dropped the previous week, and their new line of shoes had a striking resemblance to Step Up's designs. It wasn't just about the shoes, it was about the messaging. They were targeting the same young people, the same communities, with the same promises of empowerment. "I don't like where this is heading," Marcus said, breaking the silence that had settled over the room. "We've worked so hard to build trust, to be more than just a brand. And now, we have someone coming in who's trying to do the same thing, but they have way more money to throw around." Darnell leaned forward, his face tight with concern. "We've always been the underdog, Marcus. They have more resources, more manpower, but they don't have our story. They don't have what we have. We've got the community on our side. We've built relationships, and we know what they want." Marcus nodded slowly but remained pensive. "The problem is that we're being boxed in. They're calling their new line, The Next Step, and it's hitting all the same notes we've been playing for the last few years. It's not just a battle of products, it's a battle for identity. If we let them take this market, it could cost us everything." "Do we fight back?" one of the team members asked, her voice cautious. "Of course, we fight back," Marcus replied firmly, but there was an undertone of uncertainty. "But we need to do it differently. We can't just throw out more flashy marketing or new designs. We need to remind people why we're here in the first place. This is bigger than shoes. It's about the stories we've told, the lives we've touched, and the community we've built. We need to dig deeper. We need to get back to our roots." Over the next few days, Marcus and his team brainstormed tirelessly. They pored over marketing strategies, social media campaigns, and potential collaborations, trying to find a way to reignite the passion that had made Step Up a household name. But the solution wasn't coming easily. The competition had deep pockets and a well-known brand name, but Marcus refused to allow Step Up to lose its identity. It wasn't until Marcus took a late-night walk around the city that the idea came to him. The streets were alive with energy, even at this hour. Lights shining in storefront windows, music spilling out from nearby clubs, and the buzz of people talking about their dreams, their struggles, and their futures. As he walked past a group of young people on the corner, laughing and showing off their sneakers, a thought clicked in his mind. This wasn't about trying to win on their terms. It was about doubling down on what had made Step Up authentic in the first place: the stories. The personal stories of struggle, perseverance, and overcoming odds that every single person in his community understood. Marcus had always believed that the power of Step Up wasn't just in the shoes, it was in the connections. It was about seeing someone who looked like you, came from where you came from, and achieving the impossible. And that's what he would bring to the forefront of his brand. The next morning, he called his team together. "We're going to make this personal," he said with resolve. "We're not fighting their money with more money. We're fighting with authenticity. We're going to launch a new campaign, but this time, we're doing it differently. We're going to give our community a voice." Darnell raised an eyebrow. What do you mean by that? I mean, Marcus continued, we've told our story for years. But now, it's time for the community to tell theirs. Let's give them a platform, a place to share their own journeys of struggle, success, and the impact Step Up has had on their lives. Let's make this campaign about the people who've walked with us, not just the products we're selling. We're going to turn the spotlight onto the ones who have believed in this movement since day one. The campaign, which they called Voices of the Step, began with Marcus traveling to various cities, connecting with people who had been positively impacted by the brand. He met with young entrepreneurs who had launched their own businesses after participating in Step Up mentorship programs. He spoke with athletes who had used the brand to build confidence and self-esteem. He visited community centers, schools, and even remote neighborhoods where the brand's presence had inspired young people to aim higher. Each person he met had a story. A story of how they had struggled, how they had overcome personal challenges, how they had used the brand as a stepping stone to reach for their dreams. These were stories of grit, resilience, and triumph. And Marcus made sure to capture each of them on camera. The resulting campaign was a striking contrast to the glitzy, corporate-driven advertisements of the competition. Instead of focusing solely on the shoes, Voices of the Step highlighted the people who wore them. The campaign went viral. In the weeks that followed, Step Up gained a new level of recognition, not just as a sneaker company, but as a catalyst for change. The voices of the community became the backbone of the brand's identity. Young people, parents, and community leaders rallied behind the message. They shared their stories, their challenges, and how the brand had played a role in their journey. And with that, the competition's carefully crafted messaging began to falter. They had all the money and the resources, but they didn't have what Step Up had, the community's heart. Marcus knew that this wasn't just a victory for the brand, it was a victory for the people who had built it. As the dust settled and the campaign continued to soar, Marcus stood in front of his team once again, a sense of pride swelling in his chest. We've done it, he said quietly, the weight of their achievement settling in. We've reminded the world who we are, and more importantly, we've reminded ourselves. Darnell smiled, clapping Marcus on the back. We didn't just fight back. We showed them why we're different. We showed them why we matter. And Marcus, looking out at the faces of the people who had stood by him from the start, finally realized what he had always known: Step Up wasn't just a business. It was a legacy in the making. The months following the success of the Voices of the Step campaign were full of triumphs, but even in the brightest of times, the shadows of adversity can lurk just around the corner. For Marcus, it wasn't a competitor this time that threatened to undermine everything he had built. It was a personal betrayal, one that came from within his inner circle. Marcus had always believed in building a tight-knit team, a group of people who understood his vision, shared his passion, and believed in the mission. Darnell had been with him from the very beginning, and over the years, their bond had grown deeper, from business partners to close friends. They had navigated the highs and lows of the business world together, and Marcus trusted Darnell more than anyone. But what happened next shook Marcus to his core. It was a regular Tuesday morning when the news hit. A whistleblower within the company had leaked a series of confidential financial documents to the press, alleging that Step Up had been mismanaging funds. The documents suggested that, despite the brand's commitment to empowerment, certain profits had been diverted into questionable ventures. The story was explosive, front-page news across the industry, sparking outrage and disbelief among loyal customers, partners, and investors alike. Marcus stared at his phone, the notification pinging with every new update. The headlines were everywhere. Step Up founder accused of financial mismanagement, one screamed. Another read, allegations surface of Step Up diverting funds meant for community outreach. His stomach churned with each word. He tried to call Darnell, but there was no answer. Panic started to settle in, but he forced himself to stay calm. This wasn't just about money. It was about the trust he had built with the community, the very foundation that Step Up had been built upon. If the allegations were true, it could destroy everything. If they weren't, well, there would still be a lot of explaining to do. The damage was already spreading. Social media exploded with mixed reactions. Some people were furious, demanding answers and calling for a boycott of the brand. Others were skeptical, unsure of what to believe. They needed transparency, and they needed it fast. But no one was talking. Not yet. Marcus immediately called an emergency meeting with his leadership team. He could feel the weight of the room as he entered. The air was thick with tension. "We have to find out what's going on," Marcus said, his voice steady despite the storm brewing in his chest. "We need to get to the bottom of this, and we need to do it now." Darnell finally arrived, his face a mixture of concern and guilt. He had been unreachable for hours, and Marcus could tell something was off. "Darnell," Marcus began, his tone carefully controlled, "do you know anything about this? These leaks? The allegations?" Darnell shifted uncomfortably in his seat, looking down at the table. His silence spoke volumes. "Darnell, I need you to tell me the truth," Marcus said, his voice now laced with a hint of desperation. "Did you know about this?" Darnell finally looked up, his eyes filled with guilt. "Marcus, I didn't want you to find out like this. But yes, I knew." The room fell into stunned silence. Marcus felt the blood drain from his face. "You knew?" Marcus repeated, his voice tight with disbelief. "You knew and didn't tell me? How long has this been going on?" Darnell ran his hand through his hair, clearly struggling with his own emotions. "It wasn't supposed to be this way. We were trying to fix things before it got out of hand, but we, some of the team, made decisions that went against everything we stand for. The financial situation got tight last year. Some of the money we raised for the community was redirected into other areas of the business that needed it, at least that's what we thought. But it spiraled, Marcus. We didn't want it to blow up like this." Marcus stood up abruptly, his mind racing. "You didn't want it to blow up?" "Darnell, this is exactly what we were trying to avoid. Everything we've worked for, the community we've built, the trust we've earned, it's all on the line right now. And you didn't tell me?" "I didn't want to risk everything," Darnell admitted, his voice cracking. "I thought I could fix it without you finding out. I thought it would be easier to handle behind the scenes. But the numbers got bigger, and now we're in this mess." Marcus felt a wave of anger and disappointment wash over him. He had trusted Darnell, more than anyone else. And now, it felt like that trust had been shattered. But even in his fury, there was a realization: the scandal wasn't just about Darnell's choices, it was about how they had all failed, in some way, to keep their integrity intact. The next few days were a blur. Marcus found himself answering difficult questions from the press, managing the fallout, and speaking with lawyers to figure out the next steps. Step Up was on the brink. Investors were pulling out, and some key partners had suspended their contracts until the situation was resolved. It wasn't just a financial crisis, it was a crisis of identity. The very foundation of Step Up was being questioned. In the midst of the chaos, Marcus couldn't help but wonder if he could have done more. If he had been more present, more hands-on, would this have been preventable? He thought back to the early days, when it had just been him, Darnell, and a few other people in a small office. They had built everything from scratch, but somewhere along the way, they had lost sight of the core values that had once guided them. The community was speaking out. Some supported Marcus, saying that they knew he was a man of integrity and that the truth would eventually come out. Others felt betrayed, their trust broken. Marcus knew that he had to act quickly, but he couldn't rush it. This was a delicate situation. The truth, whatever it was, needed to be handled with transparency. It was late one evening when Marcus finally confronted Darnell again, this time in a quieter setting. They sat in the same conference room where they had celebrated so many successes together. Now, the atmosphere was heavy, suffocating with unspoken words. I don't know what to say, Marcus, Darnell said, his voice filled with regret. I made a huge mistake, and I know it's not something I can just fix with an apology. I betrayed your trust. I betrayed the company's mission. And for that, I'm sorry. I'll step away if that's what you need. Marcus stared at Darnell, his mind racing with emotions. Part of him wanted to walk away, to sever ties with the person who had been by his side for so long. But another part of him, maybe the part that had always believed in second chances, knew that this wasn't just about Darnell. This was about the brand. This was about the people they had promised to serve. And if he was going to save Step Up, he would need to make tough decisions. We need to fix this, Marcus finally said, his voice steady but full of weight. We need to be honest with the community. We'll release a full statement about what happened, how it happened, and what we're doing to make things right. We have to rebuild from the ground up. But we can't do this alone. As the chapter closed, Marcus found himself at a crossroads. The betrayal from within had shaken him to the core, but he knew that the only way forward was with honesty, integrity, and a commitment to making things right. It was going to take time, and a lot of hard work, to rebuild the brand and regain the trust they had lost. But Marcus was determined. He had built Step Up from nothing, and he wasn't about to let it all fall apart now. The storm that had struck Step Up was far from over. The fallout from the scandal still hung in the air like smoke from a wildfire, and no amount of damage control could erase the damage that had already been done. The company had entered crisis mode, and Marcus was at the center of it all, holding together the shattered remnants of a dream that now seemed distant and fragile. Over the course of the last few days, Marcus had spent countless hours in meetings with lawyers, investors, and his leadership team. Each conversation was more exhausting than the last, and no solution seemed quick enough to turn the tide. But as the days passed, Marcus came to a sobering realization: no matter how much damage had been done, this was still his responsibility. He had built this brand, and he would be the one to rebuild it. It was a Saturday morning when Marcus stood in front of his office mirror, adjusting his tie. His reflection seemed to stare back at him, a man who had been through a whirlwind but was still standing, albeit bruised. He hadn't seen himself like this before, unsure, overwhelmed, and desperately hoping that the pieces could be put back together. But he had no choice. The community that had supported Step Up from the beginning was waiting for answers, and it was time to give them what they deserved: honesty, transparency, and a plan to make things right. Ready? Darnell's voice interrupted his thoughts. He had shown up at Marcus's office, as promised, but his usual confidence seemed replaced with a nervous energy that Marcus hadn't seen in a while. Darnell had offered to step down from the company, but Marcus had asked him to stay, for now. They had to face this storm together, if not for the company's sake, then at least for the sake of the people who had supported them from the beginning. Marcus turned to face him. We've got a lot of work to do, Darnell. I hope you're ready. Darnell nodded, the weight of the situation clear on his face. I'm ready. Whatever it takes, man. The first step in Marcus's plan to rebuild Step Up was transparency. He knew he couldn't hide from the truth. He had to own up to the company's mistakes, no matter how painful it was. They released a public statement that laid everything out: what had happened, how it had happened, and most importantly, what they were doing to fix it. The company would undergo an internal audit, all affected funds would be returned, and they would set up a new, fully transparent system for community donations. But the statement alone wouldn't be enough. The next step was critical: they needed to rebuild trust. Marcus knew that he couldn't do it alone, and so he turned to the people who had been with him from the very beginning, the community. It started with a series of community events, town hall-style meetings in cities across the country where Marcus and his team would go face-to-face with the people they had let down. He knew the road ahead would be tough, but this was his only chance to truly make things right. In the first event, held in Atlanta, the atmosphere was thick with skepticism. The room was filled with people who had supported Step Up since the early days, people who wore the shoes, invested in the brand, and believed in its message of empowerment. But now, many of them felt betrayed. They had given their money, their trust, and their loyalty, and all of it seemed to have been taken for granted. As Marcus took the stage, he felt a lump form in his throat. He had been on stages before, speaking to thousands of fans and supporters, but this felt different. This wasn't about hype or the next big release. This was about raw honesty. "Thank you for being here today," Marcus began, his voice steady but raw. "I'm here to address the accusations against Step Up. I know that many of you feel betrayed, and I don't blame you. We made mistakes, serious ones, and it's on me to fix them. But I want you to know that I'm committed to making things right. We'll be transparent from this point forward. We'll rebuild the trust that we've lost. And we'll never stop working to make sure that we honor the community that made us who we are." He paused, letting the words hang in the air. Some in the crowd stared at him with crossed arms, while others nodded, cautiously listening. "I know words are easy," Marcus continued, "but actions speak louder. And so we will be taking steps to ensure that every dollar you've invested in us goes to the right places. We'll hold ourselves accountable. I'm asking for your patience, your trust, and your willingness to believe in us again." There was a long silence, and for a moment, Marcus wasn't sure how the crowd would react. But slowly, people began to clap. It started with just a few, but soon the whole room joined in. The applause wasn't loud, but it was there, a sign that, perhaps, they were willing to give him a chance. The next few weeks were filled with more town halls, community meetings, and open forums where people could express their frustrations and hear directly from Marcus and his team. It wasn't easy. There were plenty of difficult conversations, angry voices, and disappointed faces. But through it all, Marcus remained firm in his resolve. He knew that this wasn't going to be fixed overnight. It was going to take time, transparency, and a lot of hard work. The team also implemented a series of changes within the company. Darnell, who had been at the center of the scandal, worked tirelessly to help clean up the mess he had partially contributed to. The internal audit was conducted, and a new, robust system for monitoring finances was put in place. More importantly, the focus was shifted back to the community. Instead of spending money on flashy advertisements or extravagant marketing campaigns, Step Up began funding local initiatives, including after-school programs, mentorship for young entrepreneurs, and sports programs that had always been close to the brand's heart. Despite the progress, the path was still riddled with obstacles. Several high-profile partnerships were severed, and some loyal customers chose to walk away. But slowly, as Step Up began to take the right steps, the trust that had once been broken started to be restored. Social media, which had been a platform for outrage, now began to see a shift. People started to see the real changes happening within the company. Influencers who had once distanced themselves returned, praising the brand for owning up to its mistakes and taking accountability. Even some of the harshest critics acknowledged the company's effort to do better. It wasn't enough to erase the past, but it was a start. One evening, a few months later, Marcus sat in his office, staring at the window. The city lights twinkled below, and he could hear the familiar sounds of life outside, the pulse of a city that never stopped moving. Step Up was still standing. It wasn't the same as before, the company had been irrevocably changed by the scandal, but it had survived. And that was something. The community, the very people who had built the brand from the ground up, were slowly starting to come back. There was still work to be done, but Marcus finally allowed himself a moment of relief. He smiled to himself, thinking about the journey ahead. It was going to be tough, but he had learned something important. The real strength of Step Up wasn't just in the shoes. It was in the people. And as long as they believed in the mission, as long as they stayed true to their core values, Step Up would keep rising, no matter what. Months had passed since the initial storm had hit. Marcus could feel the weight of the rebuild, but with each day, the pieces were slowly falling back into place. Step Up wasn't just a sneaker brand anymore, it had become a symbol of resilience, accountability, and a commitment to the community. The days of flashy advertisements and quick success were gone. In their place was something deeper, something more meaningful. Marcus had learned that sometimes the hardest moments could reveal the true essence of a brand, and he was determined to make sure Step Up lived up to that. It was a Thursday morning when Marcus gathered the core team together for the first time since the company's public restoration. They had spent the last few months working tirelessly on revamping the brand, focusing more on the mission and values that had driven Marcus from the very start. The room buzzed with quiet anticipation as Marcus stood at the front, preparing to unveil what he hoped would be the new direction for Step Up. "I've spent a lot of time thinking about what we are and what we could be," Marcus began, his voice calm but full of purpose. "We've been through hell and back. We've made mistakes, and we've done the hard work to fix them. But now, it's time to turn the page and make sure we're not just making sneakers. We're creating a movement. A culture. A future." The room was silent. Everyone, from the designers to the marketing team, listened intently. Marcus had always been a visionary, but this was different. There was a weight to his words now that wasn't there before. A sense of urgency and purpose. "We've been known for our shoes," Marcus continued, "but we've always been more than that. We've always been about community. And that's what we're going to put at the heart of everything we do from here on out." He paused, allowing the room to absorb the gravity of his statement. "Starting today, Step Up is not just about sneakers. We're going to create programs, real, tangible programs, that support the people we've promised to uplift. We're going to focus on education, entrepreneurship, mentorship, and real-world opportunities. It's time to take the message of empowerment off the shoes and into the lives of the people who need it most." The team was visibly moved. For the first time in a long time, there was a sense of unity and excitement in the room. "We're going to do more than just sell shoes," Marcus said with a new fire in his eyes. "We're going to sell a vision. A vision of a world where anyone, no matter where they come from, can rise above their circumstances and create their own path. Our shoes are just the beginning. Our programs will be the lasting impact." The vision wasn't just about words. Marcus and his team immediately began designing and implementing new initiatives. They launched a scholarship fund for underprivileged youth, providing financial support for aspiring entrepreneurs and artists who couldn't afford college. They partnered with local community organizations to offer mentorship and internship opportunities for high school students. The brand also started funding community-run businesses, offering grants to help them grow and thrive. One of the first new initiatives Marcus was especially passionate about was a mentorship program called Step Up Future Leaders. It aimed to provide mentorship, resources, and training to young people in underserved communities, helping them develop the skills they needed to succeed in any industry. It was an ambitious project, but Marcus felt confident it would be the cornerstone of the brand's new identity. As the weeks went by, the response to the new initiatives was overwhelmingly positive. People saw the genuine effort behind the new programs, and slowly, the trust that had been damaged began to heal. Customers weren't just buying shoes anymore, they were investing in a movement. They were a part of something bigger. But even as Marcus celebrated the small victories, he knew that there would always be people watching, waiting for him to fail again. The shadows of the past would always linger, and the pressure to prove that Step Up was truly different, truly committed to its mission, would never fully go away. But Marcus didn't mind. He was used to pressure now. And he wasn't backing down. It was during one of the company's events, a showcase for the Step Up Future Leaders program, that Marcus felt a sense of validation. The event was held in a community center in the heart of Atlanta, where they had invited local students, entrepreneurs, and mentors to join. The room was buzzing with energy. There were young people eagerly discussing their ideas with mentors, aspiring business owners pitching their plans to investors, and community leaders offering their support. It was the type of event Marcus had dreamed about from the beginning, one that showed that Step Up was no longer just a brand, it was a force for change. Marcus walked through the crowd, shaking hands and listening to the conversations around him. He found Darnell, who had been a key figure in organizing the event. "This is it, Darnell," Marcus said with a sense of pride. "This is what it's all about." Darnell smiled, his face filled with a mixture of relief and hope. "We've come a long way, man. I think this is just the beginning." As Marcus looked around at the faces in the room, he realized that the vision he had once had for Step Up was now becoming a reality. The people who had once supported him, who had been through the hard times with him, were now a part of something far more meaningful than a brand. They were part of a community. They were the driving force behind a new vision of what Step Up could be. But Marcus knew that the work wasn't done. The brand had been given a second chance, and he wasn't about to waste it. The financial mismanagement scandal was still a part of the company's history, but it no longer defined them. Step Up was evolving. It was a brand that stood for something more than just shoes. It was a brand that stood for empowerment, for second chances, and for giving back. As he watched the event unfold, young people stepping up to the challenge, new businesses getting the resources they needed to thrive, Marcus felt a renewed sense of purpose. This was the work that mattered. This was the impact he had always wanted to make. It wasn't going to be easy, and there were still challenges ahead. But Marcus was ready. He had been tested in ways he never imagined, and now, with his team by his side, he was ready to push forward with everything he had. He had learned the hard way that success wasn't just about the destination, it was about the journey, and the people you helped along the way. As the night wore on, the event came to a close, and Marcus stood by the door, watching people leave. He felt a sense of gratitude wash over him. Gratitude for the chance to rebuild, for the opportunity to make things right, and for the unwavering support of the people who had believed in him from the start. And as he stood there, watching the last of the guests leave, Marcus knew that Step Up had found its true purpose. The road ahead would continue to be long and difficult, but it was a road worth traveling. It had been a year since Marcus and his team had first started rebuilding Step Up. The brand had transformed in ways he hadn't imagined possible. What began as a company focused on selling sneakers had evolved into a community-driven movement that stood for resilience, opportunity, and empowerment. Marcus knew there was still work to be done, but for the first time in a long time, he allowed himself to feel a sense of peace. The storm was over, and Step Up had emerged stronger and more purposeful than ever. The company's headquarters had changed, too. Gone were the days of sleek, polished offices that felt disconnected from the people they served. The new space was open and vibrant, filled with natural light and colorful murals that reflected the heart of Step Up. There were walls lined with pictures of the people who had been touched by the brand, students who had received scholarships, young entrepreneurs who had been mentored, and artists who had seen their careers flourish thanks to the company's support. These weren't just stock photos of models, they were real people whose lives had been changed. Marcus had walked through the office this morning with a sense of pride, seeing his team at work in their new space. They were more than colleagues now, they were a family. And that family had been through one of the toughest trials any company could face. But instead of crumbling, they had come together and risen. It was a Thursday afternoon when Marcus sat down for one of his most important meetings yet. In a few hours, the company would be announcing its partnership with a major nonprofit organization that shared the same values of empowerment and community support. The partnership would take Step Up to a whole new level, extending its reach and impact far beyond anything Marcus had originally dreamed. It was the culmination of a year's worth of hard work, and it felt like the final step in the transformation of Step Up. Darnell, who had remained an unwavering support through the entire ordeal, sat beside him, his usual calm demeanor replaced with a quiet excitement. "I think this is it, man," Darnell said, tapping the table. "This is the breakthrough we've been working toward." Marcus nodded, his mind running through the numbers and plans. "This partnership will bring real change. It's not just about us anymore. It's about everyone who's been part of this journey." The meeting was brief, but it was a turning point. By the end of the day, news outlets were buzzing with excitement about the new collaboration. The partnership was a perfect fit, combining the nonprofit's resources with Step Up's growing platform. Together, they would be able to provide scholarships to thousands more students, fund new business ventures, and expand their mentorship programs. It was the next step in cementing Step Up's place as a brand that cared more about the people it served than the shoes it sold. As the announcement went live, Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him. For the first time in months, the feeling wasn't one of fear or tension. It was one of pride. The brand had endured the worst and had come out on the other side not only intact but better than ever. Later that night, Marcus sat down with his team for a celebratory dinner. There were no speeches, no formalities. Just a quiet, heartfelt appreciation for all that had been accomplished. As they clinked glasses and shared stories of the struggles they had overcome, Marcus couldn't help but reflect on the journey that had brought them here. The path hadn't been easy. The financial scandal had nearly torn the company apart, and Marcus had questioned himself more times than he cared to admit. But through it all, he had learned something invaluable: success wasn't about avoiding failure. It was about how you responded to it. And Step Up had responded with strength, with determination, and with an unwavering commitment to its community. The next morning, as Marcus looked out of the office window, he felt the weight of the last year lift. The horizon stretched out before him, filled with possibilities. He knew there would always be challenges ahead, but he was ready for them. Step Up had evolved into something far bigger than he had ever imagined, and its story was just beginning. Step Up was more than just a sneaker brand now. It was a legacy. A legacy of resilience, growth, and empowerment. The company had proven that even in the face of adversity, there was always a way to rise, to rebuild, and to make a meaningful impact on the world. Marcus had always believed that shoes were a symbol of potential, of progress. But now, he realized, Step Up had become so much more. It was a movement that would continue to inspire people to rise above, to never give up, and to always take that next step forward. As Marcus closed his office door behind him, ready to face whatever came next, he couldn't help but smile. The hardest chapter of his life had become the foundation of something incredible. And now, the future was full of promise. Because as long as there were people who believed in the power of community, in the possibility of transformation, and in the idea that anyone, no matter where they came from, could step up and make a difference, then Step Up would always have a place in the world. Hit subscribe and leave a comment with where you're watching from. This story might just spark a new beginning. What's one thing that always pushes you forward, even when things get tough?